Hawley has been re-elected to the U.S. Senate. In Delaware, Democrat Sarah McBride has won a seat in Congress. That makes McBride the first openly transgender member of Congress in either chamber.
I'm going to go now to political correspondent Susan Davis for a look at what we know. And Sue, what we know seems to be it's pretty close.
It's pretty close. I think that, and we said this earlier, I think the polls leading up to the election day, are the polls right or the polls wrong? The polls seem to be bearing out. These look like margin of error races in all 7 swing states. I will say at this hour, and with the percentages of votes counted, there are more bright spots for Donald Trump at this point, but there's a whole lot of vote left to count. But in the 3 blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, he has narrow leads with about half the vote or 60% of the vote counted in all of those states, although the Associated Press, which we rely on to call these races, notes that there is still waiting turnout in places like the area around Detroit and Philadelphia, areas expected to have pretty big Democratic turnout.
I mean, it seems from the data that we have a clear sense of at this point, and again, it's an incomplete picture because we have hours to go. There are not that many areas where Kamala Harris has done better than Joe Biden when it comes to those key constituencies or those key goals, whether it was to narrow the margins in rural counties. She's losing by bigger margins in rural counties, you know, and some of the other key blocks of a Democratic path to victory.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it, Scott, even if you look beyond just the swing states, in other states, what is the electorate telling us? You look at a place like Florida, which was already going red, but has just shown blockbuster numbers for Republicans in this election. Places like Miami-Dade County, which Joe Biden carried just 4 years ago, Donald Trump was now winning by double-digit margins. So there are the red has gotten redder. It's not quite clear yet if the blue has gotten bluer. Exit polls would also suggest that she is not doing amazing with groups like Latinos and young people, 2 demographics that I think Democrats were really trying to stitch together as part of a broader coalition. But I also think that Kamala Harris's campaign has been very clear-eyed that they thought this would be a tight race down to the close. The campaign has put out a memo that NPR obtained that says, you know, reiterating that message, campaign manager Jen O'Malley Dillon saying they expected this to be a close race, that it could take at least until the early morning hours to get a clearer picture of it. But they've got more spinning to do right now than the Trump campaign.
There was one line that jumped out to me from that memo, which is one of those things where campaigns are going to outright say they don't have a clear path in certain states. But they said, well, we continue to see data trickle in from the Sunbelt states. We have known all along our clearest path to 270 electoral votes lies through those blue wall states. So not seeming like they like what they see when it comes to North Carolina and Georgia, which is still close, and we're still waiting some key votes coming in.
Correct.
All right, we may not know who will be our next president. We do know that one of them, Trump or Harris, will be. So let's take a look at what each of them would do with the job. Maura Liasson, I'm going to let you kick us off. Take Donald Trump. You've been in conversations with strategists. You've talked to his advisors, former advisors. What do they tell you about his priorities?
His priorities have been very, very clear. He wants to deport illegal immigrants. He says up to 20 million people, which most people say is absolutely impossible. But he wants to crack down on the border, finish building the wall. He wants to erect very high draconian system of tariffs against imported goods, up to potentially 100% on Chinese products. That's something that economists say could spark inflation. He wants to cut taxes on corporations. He wants to revisit the Trump tax cuts and give a break to all those blue states that he actually had penalized in the tax cuts. This is called the SALT deduction. It's a little in the weeds. And also, he has made some pretty strong comments about how he feels the relationship between the United States and NATO should be changed. He's not a fan of Ukraine. He's talked about making a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, which, if you look at kind of read between the lines, it sounds like he wants Ukraine to make a lot of concessions to Russia. And the other things are that he's talked very, very clearly and explicitly about using the Department of Justice to take revenge on his political opponents. He's also talked about potentially using the military against his political opponents. He's talked about certain enemies of his that should face televised military tribunals like Nancy Pelosi, Liz Cheney, Mark Milley, the former Joint Chiefs of Staff. So we don't know how much of his first program will be tariffs, how much of it will be revenge, how much of it will be tax cuts, but he's been pretty clear.
He has been clear in his words. I will say, as you well know, when you speak to his advisors, when you speak to his surrogates, they will tell you oh, he didn't really mean it, or you're taking that out of context. How much of all of this will depend on who's surrounding it?
Well, that is a really good point. I have never covered a presidential election where so many of a candidate's surrogates and even voters say things like, oh, he's just kidding. He's not serious. He was sarcastic. I think politicians are usually pretty transparent. They tell you what they want to do, and if they get elected, they try to do it. But some of the things that Donald Trump has been proposing have been so extreme that his supporters and surrogates, including J.D. Vance, have to say, oh, no, he's just kidding. So I take the guy at his word.
One last thing. Project 2025, we've heard a lot about it. This is this policy document written, spearheaded by the Conservative Heritage Foundation. Trump says that's not my plan. However, many of the people who did write it have worked for him over the years,
Right.
or are
And might
advising him
again.
now.
Right.
If you look at that document, how much might we expect any of it to correlate with what he would actually do if we return him, the American voters return him to the White House?
I think a lot of it will be correlated. Taking out all references to climate change, for instance, I think that a lot of it could be enacted. Now, of course, that depends if he has a Republican or Democratic House. It certainly looks like he's on track, if he is elected, that the Senate will be Republican. We don't know about the House yet, and that will make a big difference about who's ever in the White House can get their agenda enacted.
Okay, Mara Liasson.
Going to go now to Asma Khalid and then have the same conversation about how a President Harris would govern. But Asma, before we get into that, there was one more point you wanted to make about this memo that the Harris campaign has put out, seeing the path they see forward, and it's notable that it's a pretty narrow path that they're talking about. You made a point that you saw a difference in how Jen O'Malley Dillon, the key strategist of this campaign, is framing things tonight in the 11 o'clock hour compared to the last few days.
Yeah, right. This memo refers to the fact that the, quote, clearest path to 270 electoral votes lies through the blue wall states. The campaign's been holding a series of calls almost daily now for the last few days, and they have repeatedly talked about all 7 of these key swing states as being within the margin of error. They saw a path to victory in all of them. They felt like at this point in the race, things were not tightening down just to a couple of key states. So I was struck by the sort of different tune we're hearing from them now. I mean, look, Scott, I was out covering Harris over the weekend. The 2 states we visited, in particular, where she had massive concert rallies, were Georgia and North Carolina. They were clearly also focused on those states.
And again, votes still coming in, but right now she's behind in both those states. But let's talk about a world where Harris wins Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, wins those 270 electoral votes.
It's plausible still.
Right, it is plausible. Yeah. What would the Harris presidency focus on? What would be the top agenda item?
Yeah, I've been looking into this, Scott, and, the sort of broad economic broad priority, and she says this repeatedly, that her top priority would be to cut costs. And she's laid out a whole economic agenda for how she'd want to do this. She's talked about a federal ban on price gouging. She's talked about an expanded child tax credit, a $25,000 down payment for first-time home buyers. So this is all within the broad umbrella of trying to cut costs. She's also spoken about the idea of expanding Medicare coverage to help cover the cost of home health care for seniors. And look, to me, this speaks to the fact that what we are seeing, and we have heard this and seen this in polls for many months now, is that inflation, the rising costs that people have felt, has been the top concern. It's been one of the biggest priorities for voters. She knows she needs to address it. You've seen so much of the messaging from Democrats around the economy. And of course, in order to do this, that means she has to have a cooperative legislature.
Yeah.
That seems very unclear. The one thing I will say, Scott, that she has talked explicitly about doing via executive order on day one. And that caught my ear because if she were to win, she would be following a president of the same party. But the one thing she's spoken about is the fact that she would want to ensure that there would eliminate unnecessary degree requirements for federal jobs.
I do want to ask about that, though. This is a vice president trying to succeed a president whose administration she serves in. She got this question a lot and became a political hot button. What ways would a Harris presidency differ from a Biden presidency? Are there any big areas where you think this would be a different course, whether it's foreign policy or whether it's the domestic priorities?
Well,
or is it unclear?
When she has been asked that question,
yeah,
very famously on The View, initially she said not that anything that she could think of, right? And over time she has tried to sort of navigate that question, I think, more effectively for voters. But look, by and large, Scott, I mean, she would be a sitting vice president who then becomes a president-elect. That is the first time we've seen this in more than 30 years since George H.W. Bush. It is an unusual situation, but it is not uncommon for a vice president to, by and large, embrace the policies of their predecessors. You know, when I talk to folks around her, you'll hear that there will be a difference in emphasis. There will be a difference in who she staffs and who she's prioritized. She has historically, even in the days of her Senate office, prioritized bringing in people from all sorts of different walks of life, having a very diverse staff, and that is something I've routinely heard from people close to her.
That's White House correspondent Asma Hawat. Asma, thanks so much.
Good talk to you.
All right, let's get out in the country and specifically to Pennsylvania, that state we have heard so much about in this campaign and we'll be hearing more about tonight. That is where we find Hansi Lo Wong, our voting correspondent. He is in Philadelphia. Hey there, Hansi.
Hey, Mary Louise.
Hi. So I am told that you were at a press conference tonight where y'all got an update on bomb threats sent to multiple Pennsylvania counties. What happened? What'd you learn?
Right. To be clear, I was watching a live stream. The press conference was in Harrisburg, and it's important to point out Pennsylvania's governor has said there's no credible threat to the public, but Pennsylvania's top election official says the counties that got these bomb threats received email messages, and this affected some polling locations in the Philadelphia suburb of Chester County, for example. The local district attorney there says a court allowed the affected polling sites to be relocated and extended voting hours for the affected voters. And state and local officials said they're in touch with law enforcement, including at the federal level. It's not clear how many counties in Pennsylvania got these bomb threats. I've confirmed 4 so far, but in one of those counties, Center County, home to Penn State's main campus, officials say roughly a dozen counties received threats.
And what was the impact on voting? Was anybody unable to vote because of this, because a precinct was closed for a bit?
It delayed voting for some folks, and some folks had to get extended hours, and in some places it interrupted counting, but it's hard to say right now because we haven't heard publicly from all the counties that may have been affected. But in general, you know, putting these bomb threats aside, it's been a fairly smooth election day in Pennsylvania. There were some countywide issues with ballot scanning early in the day in one county, Cambria County in central Pennsylvania. The state judge there extended polling hours there by 2 hours. And there were particularly long lines in university towns, including Philadelphia. But officials say that's, you know, not unusual for a presidential election where there's often high turnout.
Timing. When might we see results for Pennsylvania?
Well, if we're talking about when a clear winner can be called in Pennsylvania, that's the big question. As of 11 p.m. Eastern, about 67% of the state's votes have been reported. But, you know, it's important to remember there's a state law here in Pennsylvania that didn't allow election workers to open mail-in ballots and get ready for counting until 7 a.m. Eastern this morning. That's a lot later compared to other states. So that slows down the reporting of results here. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind, after midnight Eastern time here, all but 2 counties in Pennsylvania have to report how many mail-in ballots are left to count. So that will be a helpful guide to see what tomorrow may look like.
All but 2 counties? Just briefly tell me what's going on in those 2.
Those 2 did not accept grant money from the state, grant money to buy new equipment, hire more workers. I'm not sure exactly why those 2 counties didn't accept that money, but most counties did, and most counties are under that requirement to report by midnight where they stand on counting.
Thank you, Hansi.
You're welcome, Mary Louise.
That is NPR voting correspondent Hansi Lo Wong. He is in Philadelphia in the great state of Pennsylvania, where, as you heard, they are trying to figure out who voted and how we will get those results and at what time. Lots more still to come as we continue tracking the 2024 election here on NPR News.
We're going to bring in Matt Gorman now, a Republican strategist with Targeted Victory. He was a senior aide to Senator Tim Scott's presidential campaign, and before that, he was communications director for the National Republican Congressional Committee. Matt, good to talk to you.
Hey, great to be on with you guys tonight.
I want to talk presidential in a few minutes, but we haven't focused on the Hill as much, so I want to start with how you're feeling and what you're seeing about the House specifically. Do you see Republicans holding the House right now, or do you see a tricky path there?
Look, my thought is the same as it was going into this evening. The House is going to follow very closely what the presidential does.
Yeah.
Right? Susan Wild, for instance, in Pennsylvania, 7. Right now, the Republicans have a slight lead. We're still waiting on some of her counties to come out. Also watching Michigan Senate. That's an open seat. Alyssa Slotkin's rep for Senate. Has parts of Oakland County, which is some of the swingiest counties in Michigan there. But shorthand, whoever wins the presidency is going to have a House, most likely, of their party.
We are seeing a story of Donald Trump doing better in rural parts of these key states than he did 4 years ago. To you, is that the big story? What are the other data points where you have a clear picture so far, at least as of 11 o'clock on election night, and what are you seeing?
A couple things. It's death by 1,000 cuts in a lot of these counties. I'm looking at, for example, Lackawanna County up in northeast Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That's home to Scranton. Irish Catholic Democrats, also home to ancestral the Biden family. And Biden won that by 9 points in 2020. Trump only lost it by 3 in 2016 when Obama in 2012 won it by 12. So what I'm trying to say is
and Harris is up about 3 points there, so not anywhere near that Biden margin. Yeah. The other, we got about a minute and 30 left. You have seen the Democratic Party focus almost obsessively on the suburbs in recent years and seen a lot of growth there in the Trump era. Did Donald Trump lose support in the suburbs from what you've seen so far, or did he hold steady?
It was a realignment. We did lose support in the suburbs. We gained it in the rural areas, and we gained it among low propensity voters like African-American men, Hispanic men. I mean, look, I understand the Democrats have done a bang-up job about drilling into the suburbs, but they did it at the expense of almost all other subgroups. And I think that's what's costing them right now.
Do you see the Harris campaign says they see a path through the blue wall states? Do you see that, or do you think Donald Trump picks one of them off at this point in time?
I will say this. If you're releasing memos like the campaign manager for the Harris campaign is in the middle of vote counting, that's never a good sign. It's a good sign you're on defense. Otherwise, you'd let the votes come in as they would. I think they're trying to spin a very nervous performance right now, currently in the Harris campaign.
In 10 seconds, what is your biggest open question for the next few hours?
Biggest open question is, can Trump put away Pennsylvania? If he can, it's good night.
All right, Matt Gorman, sticking to the time limit. I appreciate it. A Republican strategist with Targeted Victory, giving his thoughts on election night so far. All 7 of those states we have been obsessively focused on all year are exactly as expected, incredibly close right now. We will bring you the results throughout the night. You're listening to live special coverage from NPR.
And good evening. It's 8:18. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. Lance Orozco from the KCLU newsroom. It is, of course, election night. The polls have just closed, and while the big focus remains on the presidential race, there are a number of regional and local races and issues being decided here in the Tri-Counties. Voters are going to be deciding 2 congressional races, 2 state Senate races, and 3 state assembly races. Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, Arroyo Grande, and Pismo Beach residents are being asked to approve sales tax hikes to help fund things like public safety, street repairs, and expanded homelessness initiatives. Grover Beach voters, well, they're being asked whether the city should roll back controversial water and wastewater rate hikes. And residents of Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, Buellton, and Solvang are being asked to approve hikes in the bed tax. That, of course, is the tax on hotel and other room rentals to raise money for community services. Also, about a dozen school bond measures on local ballots. And Lompoc voters being asked whether a park should be repurposed as the home of a space-themed educational facility. Also, a number of city council, special district, and judicial races going to be decided. Now, we're going to start to see some vote-by-mail numbers later this hour. In fact, we expect to get the first numbers in about 20 minutes. Now, remember, with vote-by-mail and early voting, tens of thousands of ballots have already been counted in the region. Then typically, we'll start to see a return stall out around 9:30, and then about 11 o'clock, we'll get more numbers in. So lots of numbers to come. We're just getting started here. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU Public Radio.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Saatva, committed to making handcrafted mattresses that help lull people to sleep and keep them sleeping soundly. More information is at saatva.com/NPR.
This is live election night coverage from the California newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer at KQED in San Francisco. Julia Paskin with LAist joins us from Los Angeles. Throughout the night, we'll bring you live statewide coverage at 20 minutes past the hour. Here in California, polls closed 20 minutes ago, and almost immediately the Associated Press declared Democrat Adam Schiff the winner in the U.S. Senate race. As expected, Schiff easily defeating former L.A. Dodgers star Steve Garvey to win a full 6-year term in a seat once held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. AP also called California for Kamala Harris in the presidential race, adding those 54 electoral votes to her column. But the news from states back east has not been great so far for Vice President Harris. We'll be going shortly to Marisa Lagos at Harris's election night party in Washington. And we're going to say this throughout the night. We can't say it too often. The early returns that we're going to get tonight do not necessarily reflect the ultimate outcome. In fact, final results may not be known in some of those closest contests, House races, for example, for many days, maybe even a week or more. With that, let me bring in my California newsroom colleague, Julia Paskin from LAist. She is, as I said, in Los Angeles tonight. And Julia, what's the top race that you're keeping an eye on in Southern California tonight?
Well, we have a few important congressional races in Southern California that may decide which party has control of Congress. Top of the list right now is CD 45, which covers portions of Orange County and a few cities in LA County. This is a race between incumbent Republican Michelle Steele and her challenger, Democrat Derek Tran. This is, I think, the most expensive congressional race that we've seen in the entire country. So a lot of people outside of California are keeping an eye on this. Also, a couple of more SoCal races. CD 47, which is Katie Porter's seat. That's a Minbaugh race. Also CD 27. That is Whitesides versus Garcia. We're going to tell you more about that later this evening.
All right. Thanks so much, Julia. Well, let's go now to Washington, D.C., where Marisa Lagos, KQED's politics correspondent, is standing by at Howard University, where the Kamala Harris for President campaign has held its election night party. And Marisa, for us here in California, the news that we've seen looks to be very much favoring Donald Trump. But what are you hearing, seeing, feeling there at Howard University?
Yeah, I mean, we just have seen this crowd be very excited and optimistic all night. Every time a state gets called for Kamala Harris, they cheer, even if it's somewhere like New York or California, which we knew were going to go for the vice president. We did just hear minutes ago that Jen O'Malley Dillon, Kamala Harris's campaign manager, put out a memo to staff essentially saying they still have their eyes on those blue wall states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that there is still a path for the vice president here, but they may not know until tomorrow morning some of those states. And so I think that there is some cautious optimism, but generally, a lot of excitement. We're at her alma mater. There's a lot of students here, a lot of people who are alumni. They're very excited to see someone who looks like them take the stage tonight, and we'll have to see, whether she does and under what circumstances.
For those who don't know, Marisa, just give us a real quick description of Howard University. It's one of the historically black colleges and universities. It's, of course, as you said, where Kamala Harris went to college. What's the significance of doing it there tonight?
Yeah, it's huge. And I've talked to folks here who are both students and alumni. I just ran into Senator LaFonza Butler of California, who went to another HBCU. I mean, I think that this is really significant. And it's not just the location, Scott, which I'll note, her stage where she is supposed to walk out at some point tonight is in front of the Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall. I mean, such rich history here for the black community, obviously, but also just the word of the year, right? Vibes. I mean, they're blasting Kendrick Lamar and Megan Thee Stallion out of the speakers. We saw some of the Divine Nine, those fraternities and sororities from the HBCUs, dance and sing earlier, perform. I got to catch up with some of the fraternity brothers who are going to go on stage. And, I think that they really do feel like this is a historic moment, whatever the outcome is. Just having someone like Kamala Harris, who really, has leaned into both sides of her heritage, her black heritage and her South Asian heritage. It really is different than most campaign events I've been at.
A lot of these states, of course, are still too close to call, not the least of which Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But Marisa, do you have any word, any sense of whether the vice president might speak tonight?
I mean, she is scheduled to. We have not heard any confirmation. There was, she was having dinner with her family earlier. We knew we wouldn't hear anything from her until at least 9:45. I did note just recently that a lot of the VIPs, including, the senator who I spoke with, were coming out into the crowd from a back reception space. So I'm optimistic that she'll come out. I don't know, it may be sooner than later, just because I think that they are waiting to see some of those toss-up states, and I'm sure that from what her campaign manager is saying, that they are not expecting to know, say, Wisconsin until potentially the early morning hours.
Yeah, and it is important to remember that 4 years ago, Donald Trump was leading in some of those states that Joe Biden ended up narrowly carrying. So,
and not till Saturday, right?
And not until Saturday in the case of Pennsylvania. All right, Marisa Lagos, KQED politics correspondent, reporting tonight from Kamala Harris's victory party, they hope, in Washington, D.C. We'll be getting back to her later. Marisa, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
And let's check in on some of the key statewide ballot measures that California is deciding on tonight. And for that, we go to Julia Paskin in Los Angeles.
Thanks so much, Scott. So we have Alexei Koseff, a CalMatters reporter, another one of our partners in the California newsroom, joining us live from Sacramento. Alexei, can we start with Proposition 33, which would repeal Costa-Hawkins, pretty much allowing local governments to pass their own rent control laws? This has been on the ballot a few times before, not able to get a majority voter support. How's it looking this time around?
Yeah, this is the third time in 6 years that California voters are being asked to consider a measure that would expand the ability for cities in California to consider rent control. And for the third time, it looks to be going down pretty considerably. I would note these are, very early results. We only have a few million ballots counted so far in California, but it's only getting about a third of the vote so far, which suggests that it could be, could lose quite considerably overall.
Okay, and let's move on to Proposition 36, which would strengthen penalties for misdemeanors. It puts back in place some criminal justice policies that voters agreed to lessen when approving Prop 47 about a decade ago. Can you remind us why this debate has reappeared on the ballot?
This is an issue that has really been growing in concern for voters over the past few years. And it's really broken through, this issue of crime, as we've seen, particularly since the pandemic, a rise in retail theft, and especially organized retail theft, these sort of smash and grabs that have caught a lot of attention on the news. So, law enforcement and, large retailers qualified this measure for the ballot, saying that California needed to do more to get tough on crime again and roll back some of the policies that it put in place about a decade ago to address over-incarceration in the prison system.
And Alexei, also Prop 3, it updates the state constitution to reflect the laws around marriage equality. Any expectations there?
Yeah, so I would say, Proposition 3 is leading right now. So is Proposition 36. Both of those, were among the strongest in public polling leading into tonight for voter support. And they look to be doing very well right now with well over 60 and even 70% of the early vote. So, if you had to think that holds, that both of those would likely pass. And that represents a real turnaround from where we were 10 or 15 years ago as a state, putting into the state constitution a ban on gay marriage and, rolling back some of these tough on crime laws. It's just an interesting flip with where voters are compared to, a decade or more ago.
Alexei, I want to ask you one last quick question. You wrote for CalMatters today an article with the headline, "California's path hinges on the presidential race. No state has more to lose or gain." Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Absolutely. I mean, California is at a crossroads tonight with the presidency. If Kamala Harris wins, she would become the most powerful Californian in 4 decades since President Ronald Reagan. And with that is the potential to bring a lot of resources back to California and export a lot of California's ideas to the nation. Alternatively, if President Donald Trump is reelected, then California would likely return to the same sort of position that we saw from 27 to 2021 when he was president the first time around, and become sort of the leader of the resistance to his presidency. So, we're looking at 2 very different paths ahead depending on the outcome.
That is Alexei Kossev, CalMatters Capitol reporter, joining us live from Sacramento. I'm Julia Paskin, live from LAist here in Los Angeles, joining Scott Schaefer at KQED. Scott, back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julia, and thanks, Alexei, as well. Of course, before tonight's election, we have all been inundated with polls and focus group reports, and we want to bring on somebody now who has been involved in that world in campaigns. David Binder is a pollster and Democratic campaign consultant. He's been doing polling and focus groups for the Harris campaign, and before that, the Biden campaign, and Obama before that, many other campaigns as well. David Binder joins us tonight from Washington, D.C. David, first of all, just your reaction to what you're seeing so far tonight.
Well, I think, Scott, it's still a little early, but it does look like the Harris campaign is heading for a long night and potential defeat, given what the trends are showing now. So, there's still a lot to be decided, and it's always premature to make any kind of decisions or any conclusions this early in the evening. I think the U.S. Senate going over to Republican hands is pretty much assured at this point. I think the biggest question we have now is whether the House of Representatives could actually change over into Democratic hands, and if Donald Trump wins the presidency, prevent a trifecta in Washington that would allow Republicans to have control over both houses of Congress as well as the presidency.
Yeah. Of course, before tonight, the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign were both projecting a lot of optimism. And I'm just wondering, was that real or was it spin or hopefulness? I mean,
no, I think it was absolutely real. And, there's no question in the Harris campaign. As you said, I've been involved in it for quite a while now, ever since she became the presumptive nominee after Joe Biden stepped aside. And the enthusiasm and the optimism was very real. I think she had a great convention by all kind of observations and independent observations, gave her credit for a strong convention, and then also a very strong debate. And obviously there were mistakes, but every campaign has mistakes and kind of ups and downs, and she had those as well. But the enthusiasm on the ground was very strong. I think that if people are going to do a little post-mortem, and I think it's too early to do that right now, Scott, but,
it's only 8:20.
Yeah, it's only 8:20, but I think the Trump campaign also had a very strong campaign. I mean, I look at this as two very strong campaigns that were well run, and I think we just have to look at this result as kind of where's the country right now with regard to what they're looking for.
You've been doing focus groups all along in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And I'm wondering, what have you seen in the last couple of weeks that caught your attention that may have been sort of an indication of where things were going, or maybe you didn't?
Well, all the way throughout that we've been doing our focus groups and our polling, the race has kind of had its contours that were pretty clear. Voters, we spend a lot of our time talking to kind of swing undecided voters or voters that voted for President Biden in 2020 or maybe Trump in 2016. So the slice of the electorate that we have been primarily looking at least from my point of view, there have been others that have looked at subgroups and other groups, but they've been pretty clear all the way through that there is concern about the economy under President Biden. A lot of people saying that the cost of living is just too high. The cost of insurance is high, just struggling to make ends meet, the cost of food and groceries. So, people have been saying that all along and saying that they are looking for a change. And, in this case, Kamala Harris was tied to Joe Biden. And Donald Trump represented that change economically. And then there's certainly issues around immigration and the border that were clear all the way through, too, that also played more into Trump's camp than Harris's. But Harris had very strong points of view on abortion and health care in general and fought strongly on those issues as well. So that's what people were telling us all the way through our research.
You're listening to live election night coverage from the California newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer in San Francisco.
And good morning. It's 8:30 or evening. It's 8:35. It feels like it should be morning right now. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. Just getting started here. Of course, the presidential election, the polls just closed about 35 minutes ago here in California and on the West Coast. So we're starting to get those numbers in. And of course, a number of media organizations have already called California for Kamala Harris. But we're still waiting for numbers on a broader scale as far as what's happening in the presidential election. Let's talk about what's happening here in the Tri-Counties, though. Starting to get a smattering of numbers in, just some scattered numbers at this point. In the 24th District congressional race, so that's Salud Carbajal versus Republican Thomas Cole. Carbajal seeking a fifth term rather. He's got 63% of the vote to Cole's 37%. Again, these are very early preliminary numbers. We don't have any complete precincts reporting, so these are based on mail-in and absentee ballots. 26th congressional district, we're watching that. That's Julia Brownlee of Westlake Village seeking a seventh term against Republican Michael Kozlow. At this point, no numbers in there. State Senate, we do have some numbers in for Monique Lamone and Elijah Mack, who are facing off in the 21st District. Monique Lamone has a 53% to 47% lead. State Assembly, some early numbers as well for the 37th District State Assembly seat. That's Greg Hart and Sari Dominguez, and it's 50.5% for Hart to 49.5% for Dominguez. So very, very close, but those are, again, very, very early numbers. Other state assembly race numbers we're going to be following tonight for the 38th District State Assembly seat. That's Steve Bennett and Deb Baber. And those numbers, at this point, we still have nothing in for them. Same thing for the 47th District State Assembly seat. That's Jackie Irwin, who is seeking a sixth term, and Ted Nordblum. No numbers there as well. Lots of sales tax measures that we're following on the ballot right here in the Tri-Counties. These are to help fund things like public safety, street repairs, expanded homelessness initiatives. Santa Paula's Measure R, which is a 1% increase, $4.5 million to be raised annually. No numbers in for that. In fact, no numbers officially in for Ventura County. We do expect the first numbers in just a couple of minutes. In Santa Barbara, though, on their sales tax measure, which is I-224 or 2024, that's for a half-cent sales tax increase. We do have some numbers in. It's a proposed $15.6 million annual increase, 63% yes vote. Now, it just needs a bare majority to pass. Again, these are early numbers, but it seems like it's off to a good start at this point. And a lot of times it's tough with the sales tax increases, especially when you've got bond measures going on too. But it looks like it's in a strong position. Arroyo Grande is also looking at a sales tax increase to fund public safety and other things. That's Measure E. No numbers in there. Same thing for Pismo Beach, Measure F24, and there's no numbers in on that as well. Another thing that we're following is Grover Beach. Now, they're being asked whether the city should roll back controversial water and wastewater rate hikes. This is a hot button issue in the city. It's called Measure G24. We're going to get you some numbers on that. And also, Lompoc deciding the fate of Measure R 2024. Now, this asks the city about the future of more than 80 acres of city-owned land, including Ken Adam Park. There's a proposal to end its use as a park and sell it for use as a space-themed educational facility. That, of course, is on the ballot as well. And Ojai voters, well, they're deciding the fate of Measure O. Now, this is all about pickleball. After getting numerous noise complaints, the city shut down pickleball courts next to City Hall, and they opened some new ones in another part of the city. But pickleball fans, they didn't like that. They want the pickleball courts next to City Hall opened as well. If Measure O passes, it would force the reopening of those closed increases. Some transient occupancy tax increases also on the ballot. Now, this is the so-called bed tax. That's a tax on hotel and other room rentals. You'd think it'd be something that voters would like, because it's a tax you don't have to pay. It's a tax that visitors pay, and the money would be used again for services like police and fire and public safety. But some tourism groups are opposed to it because they say it might price tourists out of the market. And Santa Barbara County has a Measure H, no numbers on that yet, but Solvang does have Measure E for the city of Solvang, and that is getting a 69% yes vote at this point, so people in favor of that. Buellton and Carpinteria also have bed tax measures on the ballot. By the way, some voter registration numbers that we do have for you. In the Tri-Counties as a whole, 945,000 people are registered to vote. Were registered to vote today. In Santa Barbara County specifically, it was 244,000. Ventura County, 519,000. San Luis Obispo, 182,000. All three counties leaning Democrat as far as the number of people who are registered. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage right here on KCLU Public Radio.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Hiscox, committed to helping small businesses protect their dreams. Quotes and information on customized insurance for specific risks are available at hiscox.com. Hiscox, business insurance experts.
This is live coverage of the 2024 election from NPR News. I'm Mary Louise Kelly.
And I'm Scott Detrow. This hour, polls have closed in the western states of California, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. The Associated Press has called more than half the states in the country, including one of those swing states we have been following closely, North Carolina. And here is where the electoral tallies stand so far. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has 230 electoral votes, and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has 192 electoral votes. Still, we are awaiting final results from 6 other critical swing states that hold the key to the White House.
We do have results from some states where abortion was on the ballot this election cycle. People in Missouri voted to legalize abortion up until fetal viability and override the state's current ban on nearly all abortions. That's according to a call by the Associated Press. In Colorado, voters approved a proposal to put current legal protections for reproductive rights into their state's constitution. In New York, voters approved an amendment to the state constitution designed to strengthen New York's current access to abortion. However, in Florida, an amendment that would have legalized abortion up to the point of fetal viability, that one failed. All of that, again, according to the Associated Press.
We're following those issues. We're following the presidential campaign. We're also following the battle for control of Congress. And Susan Davis, there's a big update there.
Another Senate race was called. Ted Cruz, the Republican senator from Texas, has won his race, according to the Associated Press. This is significant, Scott, because it puts Republicans all but certain on track to have a majority in the next Congress. Republicans flipped seats in West Virginia and in Ohio, and they dashed Democratic hopes of flipping any seats in Florida and Texas. They were the only 2 states that Democrats were even attempting to flip a Republican seat. The map overwhelmingly tipped in Republicans' favor this year. The next president is likely facing a Republican Senate. One race we haven't discussed much tonight, but it is worth flagging. Nebraska, a Senate race we haven't paid a whole lot of attention to, but the incumbent Republican senator there, Deb Fischer, is in what appears to be a very tight race to Dan Osborne, who's been running as an independent and says he would not serve with either party if he was elected to the Senate, that he would be a true independent. That race, with 65% of the vote in, she's leading by less than 1 point.
Wow. So we'll keep an eye on that. We're also going to talk now about another big factor in this election and in the conversations we're going to be having over the coming days as the votes are counted. One of Donald Trump's guests at the campaign party in Florida tonight is billionaire Elon Musk. And in a short space of time, Musk has become one of Trump's most prominent and energetic supporters. Here to talk about the role that Musk has played is NPR's Shannon Bond, who covers tech. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Scott.
Well, we could fill the rest of the show with this, but can you tick off
right?
some of the ways that Musk has really helped Trump this election?
Yeah, I mean, of course, he's endorsed him, and he's really thrown his full weight and his wallet behind him, right? He's put almost $120 million into a super PAC supporting Trump that's been involved in get out the vote efforts in places like Pennsylvania. And of course, there's X, formerly Twitter, which Musk owns, which he's really, remade into, it's hard to describe it as anything at this point other than a pro-Trump megaphone.
Yeah. What are some of the big ways that X has changed? Because this is especially for people covering the news. It's always been viewed as the central place of information, and it's really changed on that front.
Yeah, I mean, so, I say sort of broadly, like, it's become much more friendly, right, to sort of to the right wing, to Trump and his supporters. I mean, Musk had, obviously welcomed back formerly banned accounts, including Trump himself, but also folks like Alex Jones. And Musk has leaned into this idea that sort of the old Twitter was biased against conservatives. So, he's made it sort of a more welcoming place. And he's also, changed the way the platform works. He's removed many guardrails that it used to have, curbing false claims and conspiracy theories about voting. And it's just a place where that's much more, you're just seeing much more of this content right now.
What sort of role has Musk played in amplifying a lot of the conspiracy theories that Trump and Trump supporters embrace?
I mean, he shared a lot of them himself, right? Like from false narratives about non-citizens illegally voting to these, conspiracy theories that Democrats are importing immigrants to win elections. He even shared a QAnon video last night. Musk really, he dominates X. It's sort of hard to overstate this. Like, he is the most followed account on there. There's been reporting that he has, had his engineers tweak the algorithm. So you just see everyone on X, whether you follow him or not, sees his posts. And then he's just been encouraging, especially lately, supporters to, report incidents of alleged fraud. So we're seeing this become a place for just a lot of unverified rumors and false accusations. And, of course, Russian propaganda, which we've also talked about earlier tonight.
Any major activity tonight worth flagging so far from the disinformation community?
I think we're keeping a lot of eyes on, sort of what people are doing with the what's happening with, say, these bomb threats that have been happening in states across the country, how people are responding to that, and just the sort of standard other issues people have experienced at the polls, whether it's, counting machines, issues with ballots, long lines. Nothing's really taken off at this point, but I think we might not expect to see some of this stuff until we have a better sense of the results here, and I think we'll be watching this closely overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Shannon. And Sarah McCammon, I know you went to one of these Musk rallies in Pennsylvania. What did you see?
Yeah, I was in the Philly area a couple weeks ago, and I dropped into one of them. And, it was really, in some ways, reminiscent of a mini Trump rally. Musk was sort of the figure on stage who was rallying all these voters on behalf of Trump. Shannon has reported on the fact that Musk was giving out, I think, $1 million a day to people who signed up for these events, essentially. And Trump or Musk has this massive audience online in addition to the ability to draw these big crowds in person. And, it was fascinating. He took questions from the audience for several minutes, and it was an opportunity as much for people in the audience to sort of tout their pet projects and their businesses as for Musk to tout, in some cases, these conspiracy theories that Shannon mentioned and his support for Donald Trump. So, it's hard to know how big his influence is, but he spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania, which, as we've been saying, is such a key state in this election.
Yeah. All right. And we got some news. We have a winner in the state of Virginia. Susan Davis.
Kamala Harris has won the state of Virginia, according to a call by the Associated Press. Not a surprise. Virginia is a state that not too long ago was one of those swing states that has now reliably fallen under the Democratic column.
All right, let's go back to the issue of abortion now. As we have noted, voters in Missouri voted to legalize abortion in the state. That is according to a call tonight by the Associated Press.
What's going on now?
This is in a state with one of the strictest bans on abortion in the U.S. And I want to bring in Jason Rosenbaum of St. Louis Public Radio. Jason.
Hello.
Hi there. Okay, so we have a result. What motivated the vote that we saw today? People in Missouri voting to legalize abortion.
I think what it comes down to is Missouri enacted one of the strictest abortion bans in the nation. I've heard a lot of national discussion, like former President Trump saying that Florida's 6-week abortion ban was too short. Well, Missouri has a 0-week abortion ban with no exceptions for rape or incest, just medical emergencies. And I think that was just a bridge too far, even for a state that voted for Donald Trump by a wide margin. I cannot emphasize how big of a deal this is, since it's in the Missouri Constitution. Missouri legislators or Missouri Republicans are not just going to be able to overturn it. And it could bring almost most of the state's abortion restrictions, not just the ban, crashing down in a matter of months.
You said legislators couldn't just overturn it. What does happen next? Will there be challenges to this result in court?
Well, no. I don't think there will be a challenge of the actual amendment, but there will be court proceedings. Proponents of abortion rights now have very strong foundation to sue and knock down Missouri's abortion ban and other abortion restrictions. I don't know how long that will take. It could take a while. I know other states have tried to have gone through the legal process, and it hasn't been automatic. But this language is pretty unambiguous, and I do not expect the abortion ban that I just described to last very much longer once judges get a hold of it.
Jason Rosenbaum of St. Louis Public Radio, and I want to stay on this issue of abortion and bring in Mary Ziegler, historian and legal scholar on this issue. She teaches at the University of California, Davis. Mary Ziegler, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Pick up on what we were just hearing from our reporter there in Missouri. How big a deal is this?
It's a big deal. I think we've seen the pattern, I think, has been that almost all the ballot measures we've seen to date have passed. None of them have hit that 60% threshold, which was what doomed Florida's measure ultimately. But Missouri is a big deal because this is a state that, will be available not only to people from Missouri who are seeking abortion, but people in the region who are seeking abortion. But again, I mean, it's not going to be automatic. There are going to be some court challenges. And on the margins, there may be some restrictions that the Missouri Supreme Court might consider upholding, even though this language is really clear, because the Missouri Supreme Court is very conservative, right? And just as was the case with the U.S. Supreme Court, when you're trying to guess what's going to happen with these court challenges, you have to watch who's on the courts.
Let's broaden out a bit to remind people there are a total of 10 states that have abortion ballot measures before voters today. Any surprises so far for you?
No, I mean, so far we've seen Florida's ballot measure, I think, was expected to not hit that 60% threshold, and it didn't. I don't think that'll be the last we see of efforts to get a ballot measure passed in Florida, but it wasn't surprising to see it go down in defeat tonight. We've seen ballot measures pass in a lot of the blue states that had them. New York's was probably the one that was the most closely watched because it was a different style of amendment, one focused on equality rather than a kind of singular right to reproductive access. That passed, but again, it's in New York, so that's not that surprising. We're still watching some races that are to come. But I think so far things have played out more or less how we've expected.
I mean, this is, of course, the first presidential election since the fall of Roe versus Wade. There were so many questions when that decision came down from the Supreme Court in 2022 about how that might influence this election, whether the issue would motivate voters. From what you can see so far tonight, has it?
It's hard to say, right? I mean, I think the ballot measures are telling a complicated story. So if Donald Trump wins and a lot of the ballot measures pass, what does that tell you, right? I mean, on the one hand, it seems to tell you that voters do care about abortion rights. On the other hand, it seems to tell you that Trump's effort to suggest that he wouldn't change things significantly, right, that a Trump presidency wouldn't be a significant difference maker, that matters would be left to the states, may have worked. So one of the interesting questions, I think, for a Trump administration will be what to make of that, if that's what we see. If Trump, for example, listens to advisors in the pro-life or anti-abortion movement who say, don't worry, abortion is not that big of a deal. You can, for example, start enforcing, this 19th century Comstock Act as an abortion ban, or you can try to restrict access to mifepristone because there won't be an electoral consequence. I think we'll see that argument really forcefully made. So I think but I don't think that's the message to take away from the election if we're seeing ballot measures pass as we seem to be seeing.
That is Mary Ziegler. She teaches law at the University of California, Davis. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Sarah McCammon, you have been covering reproductive rights for so long now, and you have seen this story change. What are you thinking about this Missouri result?
Well, I think this was not a surprise. Missouri has been without abortion access essentially, functionally, since even before the Dobbs decision. For many years, there was just one clinic left in Missouri, and it was increasingly difficult for it to operate. I reported from that area many times over the last several years. And as I was listening to Mary Ziegler, the thing I was thinking about is just the messaging around abortion in this campaign, and the fact that former President Trump has, on the one hand, talked about leaving it to the states. On the other hand, talked about some abortion bans as being too restrictive. It's been very mixed messaging. But my impression from talking to the kinds of voters he was trying to speak to with that messaging is that may have been sufficient.
Yeah.
I spoke to a woman at this Trump rally in North Carolina over the weekend who told me that she thinks women should be able to make their own decisions, but that she's also against abortion, and Trump left it to the states. And so I think, muddying the waters is sometimes all that's necessary.
You heard this argument of well, now it's up to states. They can make a decision. And, Trump wins Florida handily, and that measure almost gets the 60% it needs. There's an argument that people were voting for Donald Trump, voting for more abortion rights, like in state after state.
I mean, I think if you look at the numbers in Florida, clearly some people were doing both of those things.
All right, that's NPR's Sarah McCammon. Sarah, thank you so much. We are counting the votes and telling you what we know as we know it. Right now, heading up to midnight on the East Coast, Donald Trump has 230 electoral votes, including one of those 7 key swing states, North Carolina. Kamala Harris has 205. You are listening to live special coverage from NPR News.
And good evening. It's 8:55. You are listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. Lance Orozco in the KCLU newsroom, keeping an eye on what's happening across the country, but of course what's happening right here at home in the Tri-Counties as well. And a couple of things we're getting numbers in now, some sales tax measures that were on the ballots in parts of the Tri-Counties. These were proposals to raise money for public safety, street repairs, expanded homelessness initiatives. In Santa Paula, it's Measure R. It's a proposed 1% increase. It would raise about $4.5 million a year, 58% yes vote. So it is off to it looks like a strong start at this point. Also in Santa Barbara, Measure I 2024, that's a half-cent sales increase. It would raise about $15 million a year. It's getting a 63% yes vote, and that's with about half of the votes in at this point. There are also sales tax measures on the ballot in Arroyo Grande and Pismo Beach. No numbers in for those as well. We do have some numbers in Ojai, a very interesting race. This is, of course, the pickleball controversy there. Noise complaints about pickleball courts at City Hall. The city shut them down, built some new courts in another part of the city, but some people wanted the ones next to City Hall reopened. This is Measure O, and so right now it is getting a 46% yes vote, 54% no vote. So far voters saying no to reopening those pickleball courts. Okay, transient occupancy tax increases. A proposal in a couple of communities in the Tri-Counties to raise more money for community services. This is the bed tax. Basically, the bed tax would go up in these areas. In Santa Barbara County, the unincorporated parts of the county, 67% yes vote for Measure H. This would raise the transient occupancy tax from 12% to 14%. Carpinteria, Measure B. This would raise the bed tax in Carpinteria from 12% to 15%. 75% yes vote at this point. Buellton also supporting the idea of a bed tax with the early numbers, 12% to 14% increase in the bed tax, 57% yes vote. And in Solvang, Measure E. 12% to 14% increase in the bed tax, that getting a 69% yes vote. Okay, let's circle back to some of the races that we're following. Some more updated numbers for congressional races in our area. Salud Carbajal, who of course is the 24th Congressional District Congressman seeking a 5th term. He's got 64% of the vote to Republican Thomas Cole's 36%. In the 26th Congressional District, Julia Brownlee, who of course is based in Westlake Village, the first numbers in there, 56% of the vote for her as she seeks her 7th term against Republican Michael Koslow. Some state Senate district numbers as well. State Senate District 21, this is Democrat Monique Limon seeking re-election for a 2nd term, challenged by Elijah Mack. Very interesting. He's a college student. He's 19 years old. If he were to be elected, he would be the youngest member ever of the state Senate. But right now, Limon has a very commanding lead, 65% to 35% with some of the early numbers in. In the state assembly, we're looking at the 37th District State Assembly seat. That's in Santa Barbara County and part of San Luis Obispo County. Incumbent Greg Hart with a strong lead over challenger Sari Dominguez, 63%.
theory of the case. And Trump's theory of the case was that he could pull back together all the people who stuck with him in 2020, and he could probably add some votes in communities of color, among men primarily, or among people who were just terribly upset about inflation and didn't understand why the Biden administration hadn't been able to do more about it. And of course, he also had the advantage until July, I believe it was the 21st, of running against Joe Biden, who seemed decreasingly able to function as both a president and as a candidate. Therefore, Trump was in pretty good shape. Then everything seemed to change. Kamala Harris came aboard. She had a very different theory of the case. She felt that the national energy about abortion, which I think was evident tonight in that it won a majority, at least wherever it was on the ballot, that is the idea of cutting back on restrictions on abortion and trying to address the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court. She thought that that plus a woman of color who had a certain appeal to those communities could bring those communities back together, repeat Joe Biden's success with them, but by not emphasizing necessarily her gender, the way that, say, Hillary Clinton did in 2016, she could also replicate that Joe Biden appeal to the sort of great middle or the old heart of the core of the Democratic voting coalition that Joe Biden was able to bring back together in 2020. At this point, given that Trump seems to be leading in those blue wall states that are at this point absolutely essential to Harris, it appears that Trump's theory of the case has held together better than Harris's.
Ron, can I just ask you just quickly? I mean, obviously, there's a long night to go. We don't know how everything is going to shape up. But what do you think it says about the American electorate that 4 years ago they did reject Trump, and now the American electorate, it was always close even last time, but this time it seems very close, and right now seems to be going a bit in his favor. What do you think it says about the American electorate? What has changed? Why are they glomming to Trump now where they rejected him 4 years ago?
I don't think that Harris managed or the Democrats managed to make Trump the whole issue. They tried very hard. They tried to make this an election about Trump. Instead, it was largely an election about the mood of the voters, and the voters are not happy. There is real unhappiness around the country. Now, some of it's economic, some of it has to do with social issues, some of it has to do with changes people weren't prepared for, having to do with all kinds of social issues. And certainly a lot of it is focused on immigration. And the Democrats weren't able to tamp that down or address it in a direct enough or a swift enough way. And so they shifted over to making the election all about the unacceptability of Donald Trump. And that was potent for some voters, certainly, but it does not seem to have been enough to make up for the deficits that the Democrats have, being as how they're defending the status quo at a time when much of the country has just decided the status quo is not good enough.
Yeah. Ron Elving, thank you so much. And we're going to go to Domenico Montanaro now. Domenico, what's the big picture update at this hour? What are we seeing? Anything new?
Well, you guys have been talking about the main storyline, which is that Kamala Harris is just not hitting her marks. I mean, she's not performing to the same levels that Joe Biden did. I mean, from a macro standpoint, when I was looking at the exit polls earlier, I mean, Latinos at 53%. Biden won them with 65%. Young voters, Democrats win when young voters 18 to 29 are at 60%. Harris was at 55% with young voters in the exit polls so far. Women, everyone thought that women might be higher than they'd ever been for Democrats. In 2020, they were at 57% for Joe Biden. This election, 54%. Now, they were 1 extra point as a share of the electorate, which is good for Harris. But it does point to the fact that if Trump does pull off these wins in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, he also could potentially pull off the popular vote win.
One of the things that made me think that perhaps the polls were slightly off, and again, so far the polls are pretty dead on, was that when you look at the traditional sign of metrics, a momentum for a candidate, fundraising. Kamala Harris is fundraising through the roof, more than $1 billion. Energy levels, crowds growing and growing in the final days of the race. Crowds aren't everything, but Trump's energy levels and his crowds were shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. It just seemed like a lot of the classic signs of the mood and the story that were being told pointed one direction, and yet the raw numbers, the things that really matter, are pointing the other direction. And Donald Trump is chipping away at those 2020 results by about 1% in all the key places that matter.
Absolutely. I mean, that is just the reality here. You know, it was the same thing in 2016, right? I mean, we were looking at 2016 and we were saying, oh, you know what? All the normal things that you would think of just didn't go Hillary Clinton's way in the way that we thought that they might.
And we've got a really big update now in the Senate, Domenico. Can you catch us up to speed?
Yeah, well, Republicans are now going to control the United States Senate, and the AP has now called that because there have been enough seats that Republicans have flipped. I mean, think about Sherrod Brown in Ohio losing to Bernie Moreno, the Republican in Ohio there, the Trump-backed candidate. We've seen, the West Virginia Senate race, for example, was already flipped and gone to Jim Justice, a Republican. And, John Tester in Montana struggling, and other Democrats currently struggling as well in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, potentially even Nevada.
And the race that gives Republicans 51 seats is Nebraska, which was a really interesting race. Republican Deb Fischer has defeated an independent candidate who really made a lot of noise and made this a pretty close race. Claudia Grisales, I'm going to bring you in. You're one of our congressional correspondents. We now know that that Republicans will have control of the Senate. We know that there's going to be a new majority leader because Mitch McConnell is not running for majority leader again. This is going to be, if Donald Trump returns to the White House, this is going to be a very different Republican Congress that he works with. This is going to be a Republican Congress in the mold of Donald Trump, which was not the case at the beginning in 2017.
Well, yes and no. We have to look at who's going to take McConnell's spot. One of those senators is John Thune, who is not Trump's best friend. So if dynamics shake out to whereas Republicans control the Senate and the White House, that's going to be a very, very difficult situation in terms of what we saw with McConnell, maybe even worse in terms of that relationship with Trump and someone like a John Thune. But there are several senators in the running to replace McConnell, so it really depends on who wins that top spot.
All right, Claudia Grisales, thank you so much. We now know, as we just reported, the Associated Press has called the Nebraska Senate race for the Republican, and that means Republicans will control the Senate next year. That's regardless of who wins the White House, because now Republicans have 51 seats in their control, enough for a majority, even if Kamala Harris wins and Tim Walz is presiding over the Senate. You are listening to special coverage from NPR News. Stick with us.
And good evening. It's 9:15. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. Lance Orozco with you. Hope you're having a good evening. Lots to talk about this evening. Not just, of course, what's happening around the country with the presidential election and, as you just heard, with the Senate elections, but what's happening here in the Tri-Counties. In fact, let's bring you up to date on some of the results we have for some sales tax measures on the ballot. And usually those are hard to pass, but there's 4 in our region, and they're all doing pretty well at this point. Santa Paula's a 1% proposed sales tax increase, and this is for public safety and street repairs and things like that. 58% yes vote for that. It just needs a bare majority to succeed. In Santa Barbara, Measure I 2024, that's a half-cent sales tax increase. It raised almost $16 million a year. It's got a 63% yes vote at this point. In Arroyo Grande, Measure E24, it's a 1% proposed sales tax increase. 66% yes vote there. And in Pismo Beach, Measure F24, and it's a little bit complicated here, but it would renew a half-cent sales tax that's set to expire and then add another half-cent. So the final result would be the sales tax moving up a 0.5% from where it is now. So a little confusing there, basically to keep tax in place and then to add a little something to it. Anyway, that getting a yes vote at 64%, leading fairly powerfully there. Okay, Grover Beach, a very big controversy that's been going on for a long time about whether the city should roll back controversial water and wastewater rate hikes. Voters feeling very strongly about this, apparently. A very big hot button issue there for Measure G24. Right now, it looks like the rollback may happen. 66% yes vote on this proposal to a 34% no vote. In Lompoc, voters deciding the fate of Measure R 2024. Now, this is a very unusual proposal asking the city about the future of more than 80 acres of city-owned land, including Ken Adam Park. Now, there's a proposal to end its use as a park and sell it for use as a space-themed educational facility. Right now, it looks like it's passing just barely, 53 to 47% margin. That's with about a third of the votes counted. A lot of school bond measures on the ballot in the Tri-Counties, and a lot of them, unfortunately, not doing very well. And remember, with the school bond measure, you need 55% yes vote for them to pass. It's not 50%, but 55%. So the Lucia Mar Unified School District in the Five Cities area getting a 53% yes vote, so it's not quite there yet. Of course, a lot of numbers still have to come in. In Santa Paula Unified School District actually has two ballot measures, M for the elementary schools and N for the high school districts. Both of those are about 50% yes, 50% no. And again, they need 55% yes to pass. So they're in trouble. And this is not the first time that they've had school bond measures fail in Santa Paula, but they're trying again. The Briggs Elementary School District in Ventura County, 53% yes vote on their bond measure, so it's not quite there. Same thing for the Oxnard Union High School District bond measure proposal, 53% yes vote. It needs to get to 55 to pass. Ventura Unified, now they had a proposal. It's not a bond measure, but it's to basically continue a parcel tax that's in effect in Ventura, and that is getting enough support to pass, 64% yes vote at this point. A couple of other school districts we want to mention. The College School District in Ventura County, in Santa Barbara County, rather, 50-50 vote on that right now. So again, it needs 55% to pass. The Hope School District in Santa Barbara County. In fact, this is the one district right now where a bond measure is on track to succeed. It looks like with 58% yes vote, and the Santa Maria Bonita School District actually looks like they're in pretty good shape too, with the 57% yes vote there. Measure P. Now this is a bond measure for the Santa Barbara City College district, and creating a lot of controversy in the community. Some people saying it's needed, some people disagreeing with that. But right now, a strong 64% yes vote for that bond measure. I want to mention transient occupancy tax increases. We've talked about this a little bit. This is to hike room rental. The tax on room rentals. So basically out-of-town visitors would pay the taxes. They would go for public safety and other things like that. Santa Barbara County's Measure H getting a 67% yes vote. Carpinteria's Measure B, 75% yes vote. Buellton's Measure D getting a 57% yes vote. And Solvang's Measure E, 69% yes vote. So they're all on track to pass at this point. A couple of congressional races we're following. Salud Carbajal off to a strong lead for a fifth term, 64% yes vote to Republican Thomas Cole, the challenger, with 36%, and Julia Brownlee, who's seeking a seventh term, she's got 56% of the vote to Republican Michael Koslow's 44%. And one other thing we'll mention real quickly, Greg Hart leading Sarah Dominguez in the 37th District State Assembly seat with 63 to 37% of the vote. You're listening to Election 24 coverage on KCLU Public Radio.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Saatva, committed to making handcrafted mattresses that help lull people to sleep and keep them sleeping soundly. More information is at saatva.com/NPR.
This is live election night coverage from the California newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer here at KQED in San Francisco. Joining me is Julia Paskin with LAist in Los Angeles. Well, as all eyes look to the battleground states for the presidential election, initial results for local races in the Bay Area are starting to trickle in. The AP has called Proposition 36, that is a tough on crime ballot measure, as passing with 77% yes vote. That is very much in line with what pre-election polls were showing. That would roll back past reforms, make it easier to charge people with felony crimes and send them to jail or prison if they repeatedly shoplift or possess some drugs. In the race for mayor of San Francisco, nonprofit founder and political newcomer and outsider Daniel Lurie is leading the pack with 29% of the first place votes, followed by Mayor London Breed, and in third, the lone progressive in the race, Board of Supervisors President Aaron Peskin. Keep in mind that race will be decided by ranked choice voting. Meanwhile, in the East Bay in Oakland, efforts to recall Mayor Sheng Tao and District Attorney Pamela Price, the DA in Alameda County, those recalls are succeeding in early returns. And in Los Angeles, Nathan Hochman has a substantial lead in the Los Angeles District Attorney's race, leading the incumbent down there, George Gascon. And the No on 33 campaign is declaring victory to defeat the rent control measure. And up in Sonoma County, a measure that would have dramatically reshaped the county's farm industry is getting crushed. Measure J is at 85% no vote, a resounding defeat for that measure. Joining me now in the studio is Gil Duran. He's an independent journalist. He's worked for Senator Dianne Feinstein, Jerry Brown, and Kamala Harris. And he joins us here now. Gil, we don't know what the outcome is going to be, the final outcome. It's still very much too close to call in some states. But what jumps out at you here as somebody who worked for Kamala Harris, has seen her rise from DA to this extraordinary campaign in the last 100 days?
Well, I'm reminded that this grim feeling a lot of Democrats have right now, because this is not a sweeping victory that some had hoped for, is a position that Kamala Harris has been in before. In the AG's race in 2010, it looked like she might lose. It was a wait for the outcome. And so I'm hoping that she can find a way to once again surprise people and win in a very tight race where she could very well lose. Not looking great right now, but there's still a narrow path to victory. And I think she really has done the best she could with the circumstances that she had, but it's not clear right now whether that's going to be enough.
Yeah. There were criticisms of some of the interviews that she gave. And, when she was senator and certainly as AG, she was somewhat cautious and pragmatic, sometimes angering people on the left. Did you see any, growth or change from that Kamala Harris that we saw here in California during this campaign?
I definitely think she grew a lot and she evolved as a politician, and she really had to. She had no choice. She had this big role thrust upon her when the president stepped aside, and she wanted that role, obviously. But she did do a lot better than some of us who have been longtime critics of Kamala thought she'd be able to do in this situation. She really got out there, connected with a lot of people, became a real force of nature, a real cultural phenomenon. And I think a lot of people will be brokenhearted tonight if she loses. People who might not have cared about her 6 months ago are now very much believers in Kamala Harris.
She did seem to struggle both nationwide and here in California, according to the Berkeley IGS poll last week, with Latino and Asian American men in particular. Now, we don't know yet. We'll in the coming weeks, we'll dissect all the data. But what are your thoughts about that? Was it a campaign that failed to resonate and reach those folks, or was it just an extenuation of the gender gap that we've seen in other communities as well?
I think it's definitely gender. This was a pretty clear choice between democracy or something that looks a lot like authoritarianism or fascism. And I think we cannot underplay the amount of sexism and gender discrimination there is in communities of color. I know, having grown up Chicano, a lot of machismo, a lot of sexism in the culture, and I think Republicans are finding ways to tap into that and exacerbate it, and I think that made it more of an uphill battle for Harris, definitely.
And she had a lot of headwinds also. She inherited some problems that Joe Biden was dealing with, and although the economy data is good, of course, things like inflation, gas prices, just the cost of groceries really hit people in a very direct way, in a way that some things in the economy don't.
She had to try to be all things to all people with a very tough slate of issues on her plate. And it's really hard to do that and also seem authentic. And so you get this complaint. I've heard from people that she didn't seem authentic. Well, it's hard to be authentic as a California Democrat and a historic candidate when you're also trying to somehow appeal to Joe Rogan listeners. It was a real risk her campaign took, but it was a calculated risk, and we'll see if it pays off or not.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to go now to Julia Paskin, who's down in Los Angeles with reporter Aaron Stone from the LAist. Julia, take it away.
Thanks so much, Scott. So joining us now is Aaron Stone, live from the JW Marriott, where LA County Democrats are holding their election night party. Aaron, quick question. How are the vibes?
The vibes are more so now. I mean, the music has been going. Senator Adam Schiff just stepped off the stage. It's still not a full packed room, but it's lively. They've got CNN on watching, the results come in, and several speakers showing up. So it's lively.
You just mentioned Adam Schiff. AP has called the race for Senate, so Adam Schiff will be California's newest senator, defeating Republican Steve Garvey with, last check, about 60% of the vote. Can you just quickly remind us why Schiff was on the ballot twice?
Yeah, so Schiff and Garvey were on the ballot twice this year because they're also in a separate race to fill the remainder of Dianne Feinstein's term, which expires in early January. So it's a separate race, but it's to fill Dianne Feinstein's term, not start the new term. So
Same
that's
seat,
why.
right? Okay, great. And then Adam Schiff was just on stage. What was his messaging?
Yeah, he started off by, acknowledging his opponent, Steve Garvey, and, sending his respects to him and, joking that they can at least both celebrate the Dodgers win together. And then he really dove into kind of his work around, protecting democracy and how he'll continue to fight to protect democracy and continue to, fight to support members of the population that are marginalized and affected by, some of the rhetoric that, former President Donald Trump has repeatedly said. So, yeah, his speech touched on several different things, mostly about kind of doubling down on, the work to ensure that democracy remains strong no matter the outcome of the presidential election.
Yeah, I mean, you're leading me to my next question, Erin. Did it sound like Adam Schiff was speaking to the possibility of a Trump presidency and what his role potentially could be as a counterweight to Trump, for lack of a better phrase?
That was kind of implied, but, he was very optimistic about Kamala Harris and saying, this will be a tight race. It'll, it will take some time, but he was still very optimistic and kind of, saying words like, when Kamala Harris is the next president and stuff like that. But obviously it's too soon to know, so he was kind of walking that line.
Okay. There are a lot of Dem Party folks there. LA County DA George Gascon, he is behind right now against challenger Nathan Hochman by about, I think, 62%. We're looking at what's the mood right now with Gascon supporters?
Yeah, he had remained optimistic. He's this is based on early returns, that substantial lead. So he's still optimistic that we'll see a jump with people that voted in person today. But it is a substantial lead on Hochman's part. But last time I spoke with him a little earlier tonight, he was quite optimistic and saying that he had seen this in 2020, where he was behind at first, but, with in-person voting and last-minute voting, he could catch up.
Erin, have you heard any feedback from Proposition 36 passing, which pretty much reverses some of the policies that George Gascon helped make happen in the first place? Any response amongst the Gascon, the progressive approach against crime, against those folks?
I haven't spoken to folks quite yet because Adam Schiff was on stage and everyone was watching. But when I spoke with Gascon earlier, he had mentioned that he was very much against Prop 36 passing and that he believes it will take us back to an era of mass incarceration and, a tough on crime, war on drugs type of approach to criminal justice. And so we'll see what the proposition does mean for the future, but he was definitely very negative about it and felt that it was not the right direction for the state.
That's LAist reporter Erin Stone joining us live from the JW Marriott, where the LA County Democrats are holding their election night watch party. I'm Julia Paskin in LA from LAist 89.3, joining Scott Schaefer with KQED in San Francisco. We're going to toss it back to you, Scott.
Thank you so much, Julia. And we're actually going to focus on a race in San Francisco, a big one, the mayor's race, where the incumbent, London Breed, is facing very stiff competition. And we're going to go to KQED reporter Sydney Johnson, who's been covering this race for us. Sydney, first of all, where are you? You've got a lot of candidates to keep track of tonight.
Yeah, hey, Scott. I am currently at a party for the incumbent mayor, London Breed. We're at a restaurant called Little Skillet, not too far from the baseball park here in the city. The place is packed. It's got lots of music bumping, a lot of yellow balloons. And we just got the first round of early returns back, which actually had Breed in second place behind Daniel Lurie by about 4 points. So, not the results that I'm sure folks wanted to see right away here, but a lot of people are saying that they're waiting to see what ranked choice results look like, trying to stay patient, and just trying to have a good time as the results continue to trickle in.
Yeah, the ranked choice. Well, I don't want to go into how exactly how that works, but they continue to eliminate candidates who are at the bottom of the list and redistribute their second and third place votes and so on until somebody gets above 50% plus one. And so did the mayor, do you think, did her folks think that after that first round of voting that they would be in first place, or is this not much of a surprise that she's in second?
They didn't say that they thought she would be in second or necessarily in first, but what her spokesperson did say to me was that they are believing that there's going to be more votes for Breed coming through in the next round of votes to come through the ranked choice calculation. Yeah. So I think they're trying to, stay hopeful and I think, not try to show too much disappointment yet. But yeah.
Of course, the city has faced a lot of problems since COVID. The perhaps worst problem facing the city is a downtown with a vacancy rate of about 35%, which is very high. Is it your sense that people just kind of gave up on the mayor and thought it was time for somebody new? It certainly seems that way, although, as we have to keep saying, there are a lot of ballots still to count.
Right, yeah. I mean, Daniel Lurie's message was, these City Hall insiders got us into this mess. I have not been in City Hall. I'm the one who can bring some change. And at the same time, a lot of voters that I talked to along the campaign trail did say that they felt like things in the last few months have been feeling better in the city. But I think that Daniel Lurie's messaging has really resonated with folks, especially coming out of the pandemic. And he is leading by a good margin right now.
And with ranked choice voting, of course, in order to win, especially in a large field of candidates like we have here, you need voters to put you second, third, and fourth place. How do you think Daniel Lurie, did that during the campaign, positioned himself to do well in the later rounds of ranked choice voting?
Right. Daniel didn't have a, explicit alliance with another candidate, like some of them did, where they said, put us first, put me first and my pal second. But what Daniel did do was he sort of tried to be everyone's candidate. I think early on in this race, he tried to create a really wide appeal for folks who were unhappy with, progressives, but also moderates, kind of tried to, position himself as the person who could really bring change to City Hall. And so I think that, not having that specific ranked choice alliance doesn't mean that he wasn't angling for a ranked choice strategy. Early on in the campaign, Daniel Lurie was leading in terms of folks' second choice votes. So even if people were voting for Breed or, Aaron Peskin, he was showing up as a lot of different people's second choice votes. And that was pretty consistent across polling. And then more recently, what we saw in some of the latest polls was that he had been gaining a lot of traction on people's first choice vote as well.
All right. Sydney Johnson, KQED reporter covering the mayor's race for us. Sydney, thanks so much. We'll check back with you later tonight. You're listening to live election night coverage from the California newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer in San Francisco.
And good evening, 9:35, Lance Orozco in the KCLU newsroom. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. And, of course, we're keeping you up to date on what's happening around the country, across the state, and right here in the Tri-Counties. A number of races that we're following locally, including some congressional and state senate and assembly races that are going on. Let's check some of those latest numbers here. The congressional races we're following, the 24th Congressional District. That, of course, includes parts of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo, actually parts of Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura counties. Salud Carbajal seeking a fifth term. He is a strong leader at this point, 64% yes vote to Republican challenger Thomas Cole's 36%. In the 26th Congressional District, Julia Brownlee, who is seeking a seventh term, she, of course, is based in Westlake Village and serves much of Ventura County, 55% of the vote to Republican challenger Michael Koslow's 45%. In the state Senate, Monique Limon, challenged by Elijah Mack for the 21st district seat. Monique Limon has a 64% to 36% lead. A very interesting race there because Mack is actually a college student. He's 19 years old, and he decided to run. And in fact, he decided to run when he was 18 years old. If he had won, if he had a chance of winning here, if he ended up as the winner, he would have been the youngest state senator in California California history, but right now it looks like he's not in a position to win at this point. The numbers are still not complete, but Monique Limon has a commanding lead right now. For the 37th District State Assembly seat, which includes parts of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties, Greg Hart, the incumbent, with 63% of the vote. Tesari Dominguez is 37%. The State Assembly seat for Ventura County, that includes Ventura and much of the western part of the county, Steve Bennett with 63% of the vote to Deb Babers, 37% of the vote. And in the 42nd District State Assembly seat, Jackie Irwin, who is the incumbent, she is seeking a sixth term. In fact, it would be her last term. She would be termed out if she wins. 55% of the vote to Ted Norblum's 45% of the vote. I've been following a number of special measures on the ballot in our region, including some sales tax proposed increases for some cities. Santa Paula, in fact, all four of them, Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, Arroyo Grande, and Pismo Beach, all of the measures are leading by strong margins. Santa Paula has a 58% yes vote. Arroyo Grande, 66% yes vote. Pismo Beach, 64% yes vote. And they just need a 50% vote to pass there. Grover Beach, we've been following this as we've been moving through the evening. This is a big controversy in Grover Beach about water and wastewater rate hikes. Some residents upset with the hikes, saying they're too high. Hot button issue in the community for a while. It's Measure G24, and it looks like it will pass. 66% yes vote to 30% no vote. So that measure would basically require the city to roll back those increases. Lompoc voters decided the fate of Measure R 2024. Again, this is a kind of an unusual measure too. It was the proposal to take 80 acres of city-owned land, actually 82 if you want to get precise about it, including Ken Adam Park. They would end its use as a park and sell it for use as a space-themed educational facilities. And voters saying, it's not a bad idea. 53% yes vote to 47% no, and that's with more than a third of the votes counted at this point. Transient occupancy tax increases looks like they're all headed towards approval in Santa Barbara County, the unincorporated parts of the county, as well as Carpinteria, Buellton, and Solvang. The money from these transient occupancy tax, the bed tax money, would be used to supplement public safety and other community programs. And proponents say, hey, this is a great idea because it's a way of raising money without local residents having to pay the bill. But some tourism groups did oppose this, saying, well, this could hurt us because if people start comparing, and especially for conventions, and they look at this extra fee on top of room rental fees, they might think, well, maybe we should go someplace else. But it looks like all of those are going to pass, again, in Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, Buellton, and Solvang. A couple of school bond measures that we're following. There's a whole bunch of them, but we'll update you in a couple of them. Santa Maria Joint Union High School District, 51% yes vote, but it needs 55 to pass. Santa Maria Bonita School District, they've got a school bond measure. It is at 57%, so it looks like it is on the path to passage. College School District in Santa Barbara County, still too close to call. It's 50-50 right now, and the Hope School District is at 58% yes vote, and Lompoc Unified, also 57% yes vote, so just barely over the line there to get a shot at passage. And, of course, we're going to be keeping an eye on these numbers because they're going to change as we move through the evening. It's 9:39. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Hiscox, committed to helping small businesses protect their dreams. Quotes and information on customized insurance for specific risks are available at hiscox.com. Hiscox, business insurance experts.
This is live special coverage of the 2024 presidential election. I'm Aisha Roscoe.
And I'm Scott Detrow. Polls have now closed across the country, but we are still awaiting final results from a handful of important swing states. Here is where things stand right now, according to the Associated Press. Republican presidential candidate, former President Donald Trump, has 230 electoral votes, and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, the sitting vice president, has 210 electoral votes.
But that's not the only race we're following this election cycle. Republicans have taken control of the upper chamber of Congress with the race call for Nebraska's Republican Senator Deb Fischer from the Associated Press. The GOP now has the 51 seats necessary to have control of the Senate in 2025, regardless of which party controls the White House.
Domenico Montanaro, what's the latest?
Well, the latest is Trump is up 230 electoral votes to 210 over Kamala Harris. And Trump is in the lead in all of the blue wall states that we've been talking about, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin at this hour, he's up by 4 points, 51-47, with 83 with 83% of the votes in. Michigan's only 59% of the votes in, but Trump is up by 6, 52-46. And in Pennsylvania, 89% of the vote in. He's up by 3 points, 51-48. And this is the state we've all been looking at and talking about. Trump is up by roughly 160,000 votes. And usually, you look at a place like, the big cities and how much vote is in. And oftentimes you'll see a lot of vote still out in cities. But look at Philadelphia. 89% of the votes are already in Philadelphia. In the collar counties, Bucks County, 69% in. And right now Trump is leading there. Montgomery County, 82% in. Harris is up, but not by as much as Joe Biden was. Chester County, Harris is up, but not by as much as Biden, and with 86% of the vote in. Point is, not a lot of vote left for Harris to make up the ground.
And that is the story in so many of these key states. Harris is up by not by as much as Joe Biden in the places where Democrats get their votes to win.
Absolutely. We've seen that all over the place in all of the states. I mean, I mentioned earlier, we look at a place like Wisconsin, Racine County. I mean, just a place that Donald Trump is running up the score there outside Milwaukee, just south of it. He's up by 17 points with about half the vote in there, and it was much closer than that in 2020. So you look all over these states, all of the things that, the Harris campaign had said that they were trying to do, lose by less in rural areas. They're losing by more. Run up the score in suburban areas and in urban areas. They haven't been able to do that.
And our correspondent with the Harris campaign at Howard University says that Cedric Richmond, one of Harris's top advisors, is speaking to the crowd right now. When you don't have the candidate come out and speak and you have somebody high up from the campaign come out and say, hey, everybody, let's wait for results to come in, generally not the place you want to be on election night.
Yeah, I mean, and, look, this race could have gone in a lot of different directions. There were a lot of different scenarios in which we could have seen the race go and tip toward one candidate or the other. Oftentimes, these races do generally all tip in one direction, especially nowadays in modern politics when so many people are as dug in as they are. All politics certainly is not local anymore, mostly national. People are isolated in their own bubbles for their information ecosystems, and they don't have a lot of crossover. So for people who on the Harris side were surprised and shocked that people who support Trump would still support him despite all of the radical, controversial, racist, misogynistic things that he's said over the last, few weeks and years, frankly. It's not that shocking if you know conservatives and where they get their information and the fact that they never bought any of that stuff because they just saw it as, witch hunts and, the left going after them. Trump has been able to insulate himself very well to be able to say that the media is after him, that you don't believe anybody except for him. And when that happens, then that shows you an easy path for why they were able to do this. But not only that, everybody you talk to, so many voters, Latinos, 53%, only with Harris this time, in according to national exit polls, a lot of voters just talked about the economy. They felt like, rightly or wrongly, that the economy was better off 4 years ago. 4 years ago, maybe they mean 5 years ago, but the sense was that they felt like they were better off economically under Trump.
And last quick update, we are now reporting that Vice President Harris will not be speaking tonight at Howard University. That's according to a source familiar with the decision, telling our White House correspondent Deepa Shivaram. Cedric Richmond is speaking right now. He played a key role in the Biden White House and on the Harris campaign. But Harris will not be speaking tonight, so the Harris campaign seems to think if there is a path to victory, it's not coming tonight.
Yeah, and, look, it has not been the best night for Harris. I mean, you just have to say that. We'll continue to, the race is not over. There's still votes to be counted. So we have to say that and make sure that is aware of that. But this is not, I'm sure, where her campaign wanted to be right now. We'll go now to Franco Ordonez, who has been covering the Trump campaign. We have him on the line now from West Palm Beach, Florida. Franco, I would imagine the feeling is much different where you're at right now. How are Trump supporters feeling?
Yeah, it is absolutely much different than probably being felt in the Harris watch party. I mean, you can hear right now they're playing YMCA, one of Trump's theme song, the crowd is feeling very good about how this is going. I just caught a campaign official who had a big smile on their face and said they were feeling good. Talked to others who are very close who say very similar things, that they feel it's good, but still that there are votes that need to be counted. They are continuing to be cautious about it. But just in this room, the North Carolina decision to me felt a little bit in kind of an opposite way of how the Arizona decision when it was announced 4 years ago and how deflating that was for the Trump campaign. This North Carolina was kind of equally lifting in the opposite direction. And now with just 40 electoral votes to go, the crowd is just watching the lead that Scott and Domenico were talking about that Trump has in so many of these other battleground states, while still votes to be counted. They're just seeing that, Trump's got to be able to pick off just enough to get those 40 additional electoral votes. So people are feeling very good right here.
I would imagine also that you're not hearing any talks about the race being rigged or anything like that coming from the campaign. Although there were some concerns earlier, I'm sure with these results, they're not challenging them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think those kind of talk, if things continue in the direction that they appear to be going, I think you're going to hear less of that talk. Though I will say, in 2016, even though Trump won, there was still some talk of false votes and fake voters. I don't think he would completely walk away from that. But of course, if he wins, I think you're gonna hear a lot more support for the outcome of the election.
That's NPR's Franco Ordonez. I'm sure we'll be talking to you later on tonight.
Going to go now to Deepa Shivaram, a NPR White House correspondent who's been covering the Harris campaign. Deepa, I'm seeing images of people just flooding out of Howard University now that we know that Vice President Harris will not be speaking tonight.
Yeah, and I will say I think people started to kind of get that memo even before, Cedric Richmond from the campaign came out on stage a couple minutes ago and said that. People really were streaming out of here. It was a lot of students, a lot of other folks who had come in to the event tonight who were just flooding out of campus here. I overheard several students saying they were headed out to go get drunk. Some folks feeling a little down, especially after the results from North Carolina came in. You could sort of feel the vibes just dropping here on campus, and just a very different shift for sure than earlier in the night. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask, I was at the Javits Center in 2016 when Hillary Clinton expected to be elected the first woman president, and I remember just wailing and shock and disbelief of supporters who thought this was in the bag and it wasn't, and just incomprehension at the way the race was going. From your position, how would you describe the overall mood? Did you see any of that, or more resignation, or more just waiting and seeing? Like, what was the general feeling?
I think that's a really good question, because I don't think it's that same level of shock or, this came out of nowhere like a lot of folks witnessed in 2016 at the Javits Center. I think there are a lot of folks who came into this event today with cautious optimism. And, to be honest, this is something the campaign has been saying for weeks now, that this was going to be a really close race. It was understood by many folks that we really might not get the results of this election tonight. But I think, you had a lot of hype just from coming here tonight and of course, the last couple days of the campaign. So there was just sort of this feeling of, maybe, and then that didn't happen. But I wouldn't say it's a level of shock. I think it is just a burrowed down kind of like this may not go the way folks really who were here today thought it would go. But I wouldn't say it's a shocked feeling. And quite honestly, there are so many folks here who are Howard students, a lot of people who were in Harris's sorority, AKA, who sort of kind of shrugged and had this sense of like, this might just not be it.
Deepa Shivaram, thanks so much. And Domenico Montanaro, we have a little bit of an update from the AP about how they're thinking about Georgia. What are they saying?
Well, they're saying that Donald Trump is leading in Georgia, but that the AP decision team still sees a path, albeit a narrow one, for Kamala Harris to take the lead in the state. Harris is bettering Trump in the votes that were cast before Election Day, and that there are still potentially enough of those kinds of votes left to be counted to push her ahead of the former president. So they say that the race is still too early to call, but there is a sizable amount that Harris would have to make up in Georgia. I mean, Trump is up 51-48 in Georgia. He's up by about 130,000, a little bit less than that, total votes. I think that they're saying that there are some outstanding votes. And look, the way the AP does this, like we said, they don't project. They try to make calls where they're certain. And what that means is that the trailing candidate, as I said earlier, has no path potentially back to overtake the person who's leading. In 2020, the AP got out a little bit ahead of others on Arizona.
Right.
And the reason why they said that they felt confident in their call was because even if everything broke Trump's way, he'd still lose by about 10,000 votes. Well, everything broke Trump's way, and he lost by about 10,000 votes.
Right.
So they were sweating it out, I'm sure, but they were ultimately vindicated in their decision. Here, they're being cautious. They're waiting on Georgia to see what more there is potentially to vote. Sounds like they don't have a total hold on just how many ballots there are.
So, again, Trump leading in Georgia, Trump leading in Pennsylvania, Trump leading in Michigan, Trump leading in Wisconsin as we wait for more key blocks of votes.
I want to go now to NPR's Asma Khalid. Asma, you have been following the Harris campaign and their outreach to voters. Mm-hmm. There has been a lot of talk on the left about she was doing too much outreach to the center, hanging out with Liz Cheney. What do you think about, or can you talk about the strategy that Harris had and how it's looking tonight?
Yeah, so the Harris campaign, because I did ask them about this, because there were a number of progressive organizations, progressive voters, who in the final weeks of this campaign started ringing the alarm bells and said that they were very concerned that some folks on the left might not vote at all. They might consider voting for third parties, and they felt like they really wanted to see the Harris campaign lean more into issues that really matter a lot to the base. They wanted to see more of an economic message. But to your point, when I asked the Harris campaign about this, essentially what I was told is that they believed that there was still a tiny sliver of undecided voters who had yet to make up their minds. And their belief was that those voters were largely more independent, moderate voters in the suburbs. And that speaks to the strategy we've been talking about all night tonight, which is the centrality of their strategy was to really juice the support that they would get from key suburbs around Philadelphia, around Milwaukee, around Detroit. One thing, and I know, Domenico, you'll probably chime in on this, on the exit polls, I know that they're not a complete picture, but just looking at even bits of the data that you've seen, you're seeing Harris underperform what Joe Biden received 4 years ago with Latinos and young voters. And to me, that's really, really critical, because there was an assumption that progressives would say that, the base would fall in line.
That's NPR's Asma Khalid. We are still, watching all of these races. We will see what's happening. You're listening to special coverage from NPR News.
And good evening. It's 9:55. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. Lance Orozco in the KCLU newsroom, keeping you up to date on what's happening here on the home front. We've been following what's been happening across the country and, of course, here in California. But we're going to talk a little bit more about what we've got going on right here in the Tri-Counties. A lot of races, a lot of bond measures, a lot of tax initiatives on the ballots locally. Let's take a look at some of the congressional and state assembly and state senate races first. Salud Carbajal, the 24th District Congressman seeking his fifth term, off to a solid lead at this point, 64% to a Republican, Thomas Cole's 36%. In the 26th Congressional District, Julia Brownlee, the Democrat, seeking a seventh term with 56% of the vote to Republican Michael Koslow's 46%. Taking a look at the State Senate, District 21, Monique Limon, the incumbent, seeking a second term with 64% of the vote to Elijah Mack's 36%. In the State Assembly, a couple of races locally. locally that we're following. The 37th District State Assembly seat, which includes Santa Barbara County, a little bit of southern San Luis Obispo County as well. Greg Hart has a 63% lead over Sari Dominguez, who has 37%. Steve Bennett in Ventura County, who's seeking another term, the 38th District State Assembly seat incumbent, facing Deb Baber, and he's got a 63% to 37% lead. And in the State Assembly 42nd District seat, Jackie Irwin, who is representing, it's kind of a different district than it used to be. She represents part of the Conejo Valley and parts of eastern Ventura County, but the district now includes Malibu and places like Brentwood and Bel Air as well. And she's seeking her sixth and what would be her final term due to term limits. She has 55% of the vote to Ted Norblum's 45% of the vote. A lot of bond measures going on locally, and a lot of them in trouble, unfortunately, for schools. The one that is doing well, it's actually for a college district, Santa Barbara City College District. This is Measure P 2024. Kicked up a lot of controversy about whether or not it's needed. Some people question the need for a bond measure to do more building and repairs on campus, but the voters apparently think it's a good idea. 64% yes vote at this point. Some other bond measures, though, locally for schools not doing nearly as well. The Santa Maria Bonita School District, it has a 57% yes vote, so it's barely getting by the minimum because, again, for a bond measure like this, you need 55% yes, so it's doing okay. Santa Maria Joint Union High School District's bond measure, though, has a 51% yes vote, so it's a little beneath where it needs to be to pass. College School District, it's 50-50. The vote is 50-50 right now, so again, it's going to need to come up with a surge in ballots before it has a chance of passing. The Hope School District in Santa Barbara County does have a 58% yes vote, so if that trend continues, that will pass. Santa Paula School District, they've got actually two bond measures in the ballot. Measure M is for the elementary schools, Measure N for the high school. Both of those stand at 50-50 right now. The vote is almost evenly split for both of those, Measure M and N, and they need 55% yes vote to pass. Briggs Elementary School District, 53% yes vote, so it's a little bit short of what it needs to pass. Same thing for the Oxnard Union High School District, it's at 53%. And the Lucia Mar Unified School District, which of course is in the Five Cities area on the Central Coast, has 53% yes vote, so it needs to come up a little bit. Ventura Unified had a parcel tax renewal proposal on the ballot. That looks like it will pass, a strong 64% yes vote. Sales tax measures we've been talking about, 4 of them locally. Santa Paula voters saying yes to approving a 1% sales tax increase, or it looks like it's headed towards approval with the 58% yes vote. It just needs a 50% plus 1 to pass. Santa Barbara voters saying yes, it looks like, with the 63% yes vote to their half-cent sales tax increase. Arroyo Grande, it looks like they're going to approve a 1-cent sales tax increase to support public safety, 66% yes vote there. In Pismo Beach, it looks like they're going to approve their sales tax proposal, 64% yes. By the way, Grover Beach voters, the proposal about whether they should roll back controversial water and wastewater rate hikes, looks like that is going to be approved, to roll these back, 65% yes vote, and that is with about a third of the votes counted. Lompoc voters, looks like they are also going to approve a proposal to end the use of Ken Adam Park as a park and sell it for use as a space-themed educational facility. 53% yes vote there. Transient occupancy tax increase proposals, Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, Buellton, Solvang, all look like they are headed towards approval. You're listening to KCLU FM and HD Thousand Oaks at 88.3, KCLU AM 1340, FM 102.3 in Santa Barbara, KCLM Santa Maria 89.7, and of course KSYV Solvang 96.7 FM, NPR for the California Coast. It's 10 o'clock.
This is live special coverage of the 2024 election from NPR News. I'm Aisha Roscoe.
And I'm Scott Detrow. Here on the East Coast, it is the morning after Election Day. There's a lot we don't know, but the picture is becoming a little clearer with calls in 2 of those 7 swing states we have focused on all year. Former President Donald Trump has won North Carolina, and now we can say the AP has called Georgia for Trump as well. These were 2 fiercely contested states, and Donald Trump now leads the race 270 electoral votes with 246. Vice President Kamala Harris has 210.
The path for Vice President Harris has narrowed considerably. We are still waiting for calls in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona. The vice president will not be speaking tonight. As we wait on presidential race results in those states, let's take a second to tick through some of the bigger statewide victories we know about so far. Republicans continue to pull in wins, including Nebraska Republican Deb Fischer, whose victory in the Senate race there clinched GOP control of the Senate next year. Texas Republican Ted Cruz was reelected to the Senate for a third term, helped by a strong showing among Hispanic voters in South Texas. He gave an interview to the Daily Wire right after his victory was announced.
I think this election is really going to shift the math for Texas, and I hope nationally it's going to help shift the math in a significant way for Hispanics across the country.
Another Republican victory. Bernie Moreno has beaten longtime Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, and Republican Kelly Ayotte has won the governor's race in New Hampshire. Here she is just moments ago.
New Hampshire is so much more important than one person, one party, and I look forward to bringing all of us together to make our great state even better.
Now over to the Democrats. Amy Klobuchar has held on to her seat in Minnesota. Maria Cantwell has also held on to her seat in the Senate in the state of Washington. And Adam Schiff, a prominent Democrat in the House of Representatives for years now, has won the California Senate seat left open after Dianne Feinstein died last year.
And whatever the result of the presidential race, we know there will be serious challenges facing the state of California and the country.
As we mentioned, Vice President Kamala Harris will not speak tonight at Howard University. Let's hear from Cedric Richmond, the Harris campaign co-chair, who just spoke to the crowd there.
Good evening, HU. I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in the promise of America. We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the Vice President tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation. So thank you. We believe in you. May God bless you. May God keep you. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
So, yeah, I mean, that was a statement from Cedric Richmond, the Harris campaign co-chair. It ended with Go Harris, but right now I want to check in with Domenico Montanaro, NPR's Domenico Montanaro, who's been following all of this tonight. And it doesn't seem like Harris is really going to where she needs to go right now.
No, Donald Trump is at 247 electoral votes. He needs to get to 270. Harris is only at 210. And I think we should just kind of zoom out for a second because, we've been talking so much about these 7 swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada. And, Georgia and North Carolina have now gone toward Trump. Trump is leading in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But there are also these lean states that lean toward one candidate or another. And there's a couple of those that still have not been called yet, a few of them actually. I'm talking about, in particular, look at a place like Minnesota, where, Governor Tim Walz is the vice presidential pick, and it's only a 2-point race there right now. And, Hennepin County, where Minneapolis is 95% in.
I think it's closer there than all 3 of the blue wall states.
It is, actually. I mean, it's only 2 points. It's about 50,000 votes that separate Harris from Trump in Minnesota. And, it's not that surprising that in a potential, Trump wave, if that's what we're looking at, that Minnesota could be close, if not almost won by Republicans, because it was that way in 2016, right? And if you look at in New Hampshire, if we go further east in New Hampshire, there's 88% in. Harris is only up by 3 points, And in a state like New Hampshire, which is a smaller population for electoral votes, that means we're talking about a range of like 23,000 votes or so. That's not a whole heck of a lot.
Domenico, I mean, obviously the votes are being counted. That's what matters. But people will question, what about the polls leading up to this?
Yeah.
Is this in line? I mean, it showed a very tight race. We seem to be seeing Trump, overperform in the rural areas. We're seeing Harris underperform in the suburban areas. Did the polls show that?
This is in line with the polling errors we've seen in 2020 and 2016 with Trump on the ballot. We've talked about it now for 8 years that the pollsters are going to have to try to figure out how to adjust for what they've been seeing, the low response rates, the understatement of Trump support in particular in these rural areas. They have tried a lot of stuff, right? I mean, we're talking about, they reach people on text message now. They do it in Spanish and in English. They, are getting them online through live callers. It's a whole new, different way that they're doing this, and still yet we're looking at a 2 to 3 point, maybe more, error if we're looking at that, just nationally. I mean, right now, nationally, Donald Trump is leading in the popular vote by about 4.5 million votes, 51-47. That I think would be surprising to a lot of people because even in 2016, Hillary Clinton, won by 3 million votes. Now, California vote is still not counted. It's going to be coming in. Hillary Clinton was up by only a couple 100,000 votes, at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it looked like she was going to win, but she won by a few million. Now, that very well may be the case with Harris. Of course, these elections aren't won by popular vote.
No, well, thank you so much, Domenico. We'll keep talking to you throughout the night.
One other quick update, not necessarily a surprise, but Trump has picked up that one electoral vote in Nebraska's first congressional districts, and now he has 247 electoral votes. Harris has 210. And we're going to go now to Georgia, which the AP has called for Donald Trump. We're going to bring in our man in Georgia, Stephen Fowler. Hey, Stephen.
Hey there.
Democrats had felt really good about Georgia over the last week or so, even with Republicans showing up to early vote at higher rates than previous elections. They felt like those suburbs, those big urban areas were turning out at the margins they wanted. What happened to that? What is the story of how Trump won Georgia?
Well, Scott, Democrats did, to a certain degree, get the suburban turnout. In fact, if you look at the swing map of the country of how the counties have changed in margin from 2020 to 2024, it's a sea of red across much of the country, with a notable exception of Atlanta's suburbs. The city proper saw a little bit of drift towards Trump, but in the southern suburbs like Henry County and Clayton County and even some of the redder exurbs, Harris did very, very well in swinging that margin. But in the rest of the state, the Republican voters that showed up in early voting were also complemented by Republican voters that showed up on Election Day. So Trump improved in both the margins and turnout, and that was just too much for Democrats to overcome.
Georgia was a fiercely contested state. It was also one of the states that Trump focused on after the 2020 election when he tried to overturn the results. He lost Georgia by a slim margin. He really dwelled on that. You were one of the reporters who broke the story of Trump on the phone pressuring the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to, quote, find some votes, as Trump framed it. And that obviously led to criminal charges in Atlanta and federal criminal charges, among other things. But it also led to a lot of questions about whether Trump had alienated the Republican Party in Georgia in a way that, helped Democrats win Senate seats narrowly. The party seemed to come back together this year, at least on the high level.
Yeah, I mean, there's not necessarily evidence yet that those people that left after 2020 came back, but this is a point in favor of the Republicans' unique get-out-the-vote strategy that they did this year, the Trump Force 47, which didn't use paid canvassers. It relied on grassroots, enthusiastic volunteers getting out into their own community, and the Republican argument heading into Election Day was, the only get out the vote we need is Donald Trump. And I think as you look across the country, they have a very good point.
Thank you, Stephen. Asmahalad, Stephen Fowler said something that I think a lot of people in different ways are comparing the map we're seeing so far with the 2016 map, the 2016 conversation. You and I covered that campaign. There were so many conversations where the Clinton campaign felt very confident because they said, we have a ground game, Trump doesn't. We're taking this seriously, Trump doesn't. We have analytics, we have people knocking on doors, making calls. Same conversation here. So much focus on the astronomical difference in spending and focus on the ground game, and yet it was the Trump voters who showed up in greater margins in these key places.
That's right. I mean, I got a note from the Harris campaign just the other day saying that during that final weekend of campaigning, they were touting that they had knocked on more than 3 million doors. They were routinely sending out these rather astonishing, just figures of what they were doing, particularly in these 7 key states. I think the one difference, though, Scott, I will say, and how this feels fundamentally different than covering Clinton, is there was a level of confidence from the Clinton campaign that this was theirs. I have often heard from the Harris campaign that they felt they were the underdogs. There was certainly a level of, confidence that they were projecting, I would say, in this last couple of days, but they have historically not projected that this was in the can, in the bag for them. And that feels fundamentally different than that 2016 cycle.
Turning now to Mara Eliason, you and your colleague Sue Davis, who's not in here right now, held focus groups with so-called double haters, people who started this year disliking both Donald Trump and President Biden. You checked in with them again last month with Vice President Harris in the race. Those are exactly the type of voters that every person in politics has been trying to figure out this year. It doesn't feel like they were breaking for Harris, right?
Well, the Harris campaign said that they were breaking for them.
The
Harris campaign said that they felt that late deciders were breaking for them by big margins. That was exactly the opposite of what happened in 2016, where late deciders broke for Trump. But what I think is so interesting about this race is that the fundamentals of the race were in Donald Trump's favor. I mean, if he wasn't such an unusual candidate, we would say, based on historical rules, which I know only work till they stop working, somebody who's running against an administration this unpopular when prices are this high, they have a whole lot of advantages. And there were many Republicans who thought that Donald Trump was squandering those advantages by being undisciplined, by not sticking to his campaign's message of hammering the border and the economy. But he did it anyway. And I think that the Democratic Party, if he ends up as the president, every losing party does a lot of soul searching, and they're going to have to try to figure out exactly what went wrong and what do they need to do differently. But just to step back for 1 minute, if he is the president, what we're facing is not just two parties who fought it out on the 50-yard line. This is going to be, according to everything that he has said and promised, the most radical, profound change in American governance in our lifetimes. I think more than our lifetimes. I mean, he wants to do away with the professional civil service. He wants to do away with our alliances abroad. He wants to, instead of dealing with climate change, he wants to drill, baby, drill. There are going to be a lot of really profound changes and, possibly use the military against his opponents. These are all things that he said he would do. So this is a very, very potentially consequential election.
Can I chime in, though, and say one thing here? Because there has been an effort by the Biden administration to Trump-proof some of these things, particularly the civil service.
We can talk a lot more about this in throughout the show, but we do have to pause for a break right here. A lot to talk about. You are listening to live special coverage from NPR News. Stick with us.
And good evening. It is 10:15. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. Lance Orozco in the KCLU newsroom, keeping you up to date on what's happening on the home front here in the Tri-Counties as this election heads into the history books. One of the things that happened, some sales tax measures were on the ballot, and it looks like they may be headed to approval in a couple of communities right here in the Tri-Counties. In Santa Paula, there was Measure R1 on the ballot. It was a proposed 1% sales tax increase to take it from 8.25% to 9.25%. It would raise about $4.5 million annually. And it has a 58% yes vote, so it's in a strong position. It just needs a 50% plus 1 to pass. Santa Barbara, Measure I-2024, it's a proposed half-cent increase, and it would raise about $15 million a year. Again, for public safety, street repairs, homelessness initiatives, things that municipal governments are involved with. And voters apparently liking that idea. 63% yes vote at this point. Arroyo Grande, Measure E24, it's a 1% sales tax increase, 66% yes vote. And Pismo Beach, Measure F24, and that would renew a half-cent sales tax, the current one that's set to expire, and add another half-cent. So the net result is, if you're in Pismo Beach, you would pay a half-cent more than you do now. It would raise about $4 million annually, that getting a 64% yes vote. Grover Beach voters, we've been watching this all evening long, asked whether the city should roll back controversial water and wastewater rate hikes, a real controversial thing in the city there. 65% yes vote on rolling back those hikes, with about a third of the votes counted at this point. In Lompoc, Measure R 2024, what should happen to the city's Ken Adam Park and some acreage around it, about 82 acres in all. Should they end the use of it as a park and sell it for use as a space-themed educational facility? Voters apparently like that idea. 53% yes vote, although at this point, again, less than a third of the votes, about a third of the votes counted. So it's still kind of close on that one. So it's still too soon to call that. One issue that we have been kind of following in Ojai, and this is the pickleball controversy. After getting a lot of noise complaints, the city shut down the pickleball courts next to City Hall, opened new ones in another part of the city. But a lot of pickleball fans, they didn't like that. In fact, they said, we're going to put this on the ballot. They did it. Measure O would force the reopening of those closed facilities. But right now, that is losing 45% to 55%. So 45% yes vote on that. Transient occupancy tax increases. Now, this is the idea of raising the bed taxes that people pay on hotel rooms, and a lot of people like the idea because basically visitors to the area are going to be picking up the tab for these tax hikes. The tourism industry not so keen on it. They're afraid that it may hurt tourism if people have to pay yet more on top of their hotel rooms, but it looks like this is going to pass in a couple of communities. Santa Barbara County has Measure H. Now, this applies, it's a county-wide initiative, but it only applies to unincorporated parts of the county and not cities itself, but that getting a 67% yes vote. Carpinteria's Measure B, which would raise their occupancy tax, 75% yes vote, so that looks like it's headed towards passage. Buellton, Measure D, looks like it's headed to passage, 57% yes vote. And Solvang's Measure E getting a 69% yes vote, so it is in solid position as well. Bond measures, again, we've been following these all evening long. Santa Barbara City College, Measure P, 64% yes vote. That was pretty controversial. Lompoc, the Unified School District, 57% yes vote, just over that line of 55% you need for passage of a school bond measure, but still votes to be counted. Some other ones in trouble, though. Santa Maria Joint Union High School District has a 51% yes vote, so well below that 55% threshold. College School District's bond proposal at 50-50. Hope School District at 58%, so it's over the line to pass. In Santa Paula, Measure M and N, two bond measures, one for the elementary schools, one for the high school. Those both at 50% yes, 50% no, so they're going to have to come up before that has a shot at passage. And the Briggs Elementary School District, 53% yes vote, so that's in a little bit of trouble. Same thing for the Oxnard Union High School District, 53%. And on the Central Coast, Lucia Mar Unified School District in the 5 cities at 53% yes vote. A couple of state assembly races we'll check in real quickly on. The 38th District State Assembly seat, Steve Bennett with 63% of the vote to Deb Babers, 37% of the vote. And in the 42nd District State Assembly seat race, Jackie Irwin, 55% yes vote, Ted Norblum, 45% vote. And 37th District, that's Greg Hart, the incumbent, challenged by Sari Dominguez, 63% yes vote to Sari Dominguez's 37% vote. Okay, we're going to keep you posted all evening long. You're listening to Election 2024 coverage on KCLU. It's 1020 on KCLU Public Radio.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Saatva, committed to making handcrafted mattresses that help lull people to sleep and keep them sleeping soundly. More information is at saatva.com/NPR.
You're listening to live election coverage from the California newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer here at KQED in San Francisco, and I'm joined by Julia Paskin with LAist in Los Angeles. Minutes after the polls closed, the Associated Press declared Democrat Adam Schiff the winner in his race for the U.S. Senate against former L.A. Dodgers star Steve Garvey.
And whatever the result of the presidential race, we know there will be serious challenges facing the state of California and the country. Regardless of the outcome, regardless of the way people may have voted, I want to make one thing clear. As your senator, I am committed to standing up for every Californian.
Congressman Adam Schiff speaking tonight after declaring victory. AP declared him the winner in that U.S. Senate race. AP also put California in Kamala Harris's column. Her campaign, by the way, says she will not be speaking tonight. In Los Angeles, District Attorney George Gascon, who's been under fire for his liberal policies and reform agenda, is far behind challenger Nathan Hochman, a former federal prosecutor, promising to roll back some of Gascon's policies. Another county prosecutor, DA Pamela Price in Alameda County, is facing a recall. That and another recall against Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao are both well ahead, although Mayor Tao is not conceding defeat.
You know, I'm very optimistic that Oaklanders are going to see through the millionaire person who actually funded this recall. And so what that means is that, you know, we also know that Oaklanders, we vote late. Just like myself, I just dropped off my ballot.
In San Francisco, meanwhile, Mayor London Breed is behind newcomer and nonprofit executive Daniel Lurie, who spent millions of dollars from his family's fortune to help win and so far has been leading in first place votes and one ranked choice voting round. Former interim mayor Mark Farrell has conceded. Well, still up in the air, very much so, is a number of House races in California, and the outcome of those races could well decide which party controls the House of Representatives. As we know, the Republican Party has taken over the Senate with some defeats of incumbent Democrats. And so now it falls to California, perhaps, to hold at least control for one branch of the government in Democratic hands. Joshua Yeager is a reporter with KVPR. He is covering one of those tightly contested races, the Congressional District 22. That one is down around Bakersfield. It's incumbent Republican David Valadao against Rudy Salas. And Joshua joins us now from Bakersfield. And Joshua, this is a rematch from 2 years ago.
Hey, Scott. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a rematch. And I'm here at Salas's watch party in Bakersfield. Despite early showings that have Salas down considerably in this race, he's behind by about 6 points with 40% of precincts reporting so far. The mood's still been jovial. I mean, this is a race where it's very close and ballots will continue to be counted in the days and weeks ahead. Much like its neighboring district, the 13th district, where votes are also neck and neck right now. We don't expect to have a definitive answer tonight.
What would you say were the biggest issues in that race? I mean, it is an agricultural district with a lot of poverty, a lot of farm issues, water, and so on. What were these candidates talking about?
Well, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, the candidates struggle to distinguish themselves on the issues. I mean, you have David Valadao, which is the Republican incumbent in this race, but in a lot of ways, he's not an ordinary Republican. He was one of just 10 who voted to impeach former President Donald Trump for his involvement with the January 6th insurrection, and he is one of just 2 who continued to hold office after doing so. So both of these candidates have really run towards the middle, I would say. They both campaigned strongly on water issues, which is really important for a lot of the farmers in this region and also for a lot of the rural communities that struggle to have access to clean and affordable drinking water. They've also campaigned on meat and potato issues like inflation.
Yeah, and I'm sure that because it is an area where people do a lot of driving, that gas prices were also a big issue, grocery prices as well, and of course immigration, border security, all the things we've been hearing about across the country in the presidential campaign as well. Joshua Yeager, KVPR reporter, tonight in Bakersfield covering the 22nd congressional race between David Valadao, the incumbent, and Democratic challenger Rudy Salas. Joshua, thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott.
And now I'm going to go back down to Los Angeles with Julia Paskin. She's got some updates on some of the congressional races down there. Hey, Julia.
Thanks so much, Scott. So I'm joined in studio by Jill Replogle, one of our correspondents here at LAist. And Jill also focuses a lot on Orange County. So you're a great person to give us an update on some of these congressional races. Can we start with Congressional District 45? This is Michelle Steele, the incumbent, and a Republican versus Democratic challenger, Derek Tran. Jill, tell us why Tran has been the first to give Steele like a serious run for her money.
Yeah, well, he is Vietnamese American, and this area has one of the, I believe it is the largest concentration of Vietnamese outside of Vietnam. It is the heart of Orange County's Little Saigon, and Derek Tran would be the first Vietnamese American to represent this district. So I think he's getting a lot of attention because of that. I also think that, traditionally the Vietnamese community has voted Republican, has aligned very strongly with the Republican Party in Orange County. But we're seeing a bit of a shift. There are some younger politicians who are Democrats. There are some progressive Vietnamese youth groups that really worked a lot during this campaign. And there was also a ton of money put into this race for outside spending. This was the most expensive House race in the country, according to Open Secrets. That's a national nonprofit that follows campaign funding. A lot of that money from national groups like the Congressional Leadership Fund on the Republican side, House Majority PAC on the Democratic side. So just also a ton of money in this race.
Yeah, I mean, on the early results here, it does seem that Tran is up, but not even by a whole percentage point.
Just a tiny bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Congressional District, the other CD that we've been talking about a lot today. 47. This is Katie Porter's seat that is now up for grabs, and we are going to hear from Katie Porter in just a little bit, so make sure that you stay with us. So Porter had flipped this historically red district blue in 2018. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, and she, just kind of barely squeaked out a victory in 2022. So it was, this one is very much a toss-up as well. Dave Min is a state senator. He's running as a Democrat in that race. Republican Scott Baugh, also former state legislator and head of the Republican Party in Orange County. He's run for a couple of different races in recent years and not won. Right now, it is close. Dave Min has a bit more of a lead, I believe, by a couple of percentage points. Again, it's way early in the counting, so it's it was ranked leans Democrat by the Cook Political Report, but we'll see. It's still kind of a toss-up. That was a very close race last time around.
Let's go back to Congressional District 45. You have been part of an ongoing LAist investigation into how taxpayer funds have been spent by the Orange County Board of Supervisors that were serving during the pandemic, specifically on money that went to seniors in need. What did we find recently in relation to Michelle Steele?
Yeah, so just last week, a couple of our colleagues, published a story that found that Steele was formerly on the Orange County Board of Supervisors, a very powerful position. She paid a company that produced the mailers for her congressional campaign in 2020 to offer meals during the pandemic. This is money that all of the supervisors got to give out to offer meals to people in need during the pandemic, and those meals cost 3 times more than meals that were offered in other supervisors' districts, and there's a question of whether there might have been a conflict of interest there. Steele's spokesperson said, the firm was well qualified because of its expertise in logistics, and they accused they accused us of attempting to sway the election, and really both sides of the campaign used this story to, the Tran campaign used it to try to make a connection between Steele and former supervisor Andrew Doe, who pleaded guilty to bribery last week, and it really just became a big issue in the final days leading up to the end of this campaign.
That's LAist Orange County correspondent Jill Replogle. I'm Julia Paskin here at LAist in Los Angeles. Turning it back to you, Scott.
Thanks so much, Julia. And we're going to go now to a member of Congress from California. Katie Porter is the Democratic representative for California's 47th Congressional District in Orange County. She left that seat, or didn't run for re-election, I should say, to run for the U.S. Senate, and did not make the top 2. But she joins us now. Congresswoman Porter, what is your reaction looking at this map tonight across the country? It's a lot of red states. What do you make of what we're seeing?
Well, I definitely think that the map is tough in terms of, we've lost the Senate, but I think we have to dig in here. I think we have to consider ways that we can hold Trump accountable, both as, blue states like California, but also I think the Democrats have a really strong trajectory and possibility here to win the House of Representatives. And so I have been talking a lot about why that's so important, that we did this in 2018 when Democrats won the House. We're able to slow down so many of the harmful things that Trump was doing. So I think we need to dig in. We need to not give up. And we need to make sure that we're willing to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I think California, both the House races that we're going to win to contribute to the Democratic majority, but also the state of California is in a really good position to do that.
You mentioned the House races, and there are 5 or 6 that were considered toss-ups, including yours, which was leaning Democrat. And right now, State Senator Dave Min, is leading in that race against Scott Baugh, whom you defeated a couple of years ago. What is your take on of the seats that are up for grabs in California, those 6 or 5, depending on how you count them? Which ones are you most optimistic about?
Well, I think the district that I currently represent, the 47th district, will go for Dave Min. I think late as tonight goes on, we're going to see the margins for Democrats shrink a little bit. And then I think tomorrow and Thursday and Friday, as we count that late dropped-off ballot, we're going to see Democrats have a more solid lead. So I expect Dave Min to win. Very excited about Derek Tran. He has run an amazing, amazing race against Michelle Steele. I think he has a real shot. I'm encouraged by the early results for Will Rollins, who's running against Ken Calvert. And of course, he very, very narrowly lost last time. And so I think we're in the position to pick up 2-3 seats here. And I think combined with what we've done, they just called a seat in New York for Josh Riley, a Democrat. That's a pickup there. I think we're on track to win the House.
Yeah. It looks like voters are definitely passing Proposition 36, which will roll back some of the criminal justice reforms. That was an issue that split Democrats, with big city mayors like London Breed in San Francisco, Matt Mahan in San Jose, and Todd Gloria in San Diego, all supporting Prop 36, Governor Newsom opposing it. And we're also seeing George Gascon, the progressive DA in Los Angeles, likely losing tonight, and the DA in Alameda County, Pamela Price, another progressive, probably going down to a recall. What do you make of these, what voters are saying tonight? What is the message you think Democrats and others should be hearing?
Well, I think there is concern and has been concern about wanting to make sure that we have good safety and good order in our communities. We've seen a lot of those mayors that you just mentioned, for example, put a real emphasis on addressing homelessness, addressing substance use, and I think those things need to continue. And so I think what people are saying is we see progress in making our communities safer. Both the statistics bear that out, but I also think people are feeling that way. And I think what they're signaling with Prop 36 is they want that to continue.
And I'm wondering how you're thinking about your own future, because you've been discussed as a possible candidate for governor in 2026, and I know you're going to say that's for another day. But what do you see for yourself in terms of your contribution to public service?
Well, look, I got into politics for the first time in my entire life in 2018 because Donald Trump was elected, because I knew that he was going to be terrible. We needed someone who would fight for him, who would be willing to hold his administration to account. And so I'm watching very, very carefully. I very much hope that Kamala Harris can still become our president. And I think we just won't know for a little bit if that's going to be the case. But I do think that the very same energy that animated me to fight, to be willing to fight for our Constitution, to fight for our rights, to stand up to corruption, most of all that fight is still in me, and it's still going to be taking aim squarely at Donald Trump.
All right. Congresswoman Katie Porter from the 47th Congressional District, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You're listening to live election coverage from the California Newsroom. I'm Scott Schaefer in San Francisco. And we're going to...
And good evening. It is 10:34. You are listening to KCLU, and we're, of course, keeping you up to date on what's happening right here in the Tri-Counties, as well as, of course, the national coverage you're getting, and from our California newsroom, what's happening around the state. And we are going to start with a look at the congressional races for some of the the districts that serve the Tri-Counties. The 24th District congressional race, that is incumbent Salud Carbajal, the Democrat, seeking a fifth term, and he is leading 64% to a 36% over Republican challenger Thomas Cole, who's a lawyer and retired developer. In the 26th congressional district, Julia Brownlee, the congresswoman out of Westlake Village, seeking a seventh term. She has 56% of the vote to Republican Michael Koslow's 46% of the vote. State Senate race, the State Senate District 21, Monique Limon seeking a second term in office. She's got 64% of the vote to Republican challenger Elijah Max, 36%. 37th State Assembly seat, that is Greg Hart, the incumbent, seeking a second term with Sari Dominguez challenging him. He has 63% of the vote to Dominguez's 37%. In the State Assembly, Steve Bennett seeking another term, Democrat, 63% of the vote to Republican challenger Deb Baber's 37%. And the 42nd District State Assembly race, Jackie Irwin, who was seeking her sixth term. It would be her final term if she wins this because of term limits. She has 55% of the vote to Republican Ted Norblum's 45% of the vote. A lot of bond measures. We want to take a moment to talk about these. In fact, this is probably the one area of things in the ballot that really is in flux. The State Senate, the State Assembly, the congressional races I talked about, basically all the incumbents at this point look like they're on a track to return to office. But some of the bond measures in our area are in trouble. And one of the things you need to remember with the school bond, it needs a 55% supermajority yes vote to pass. And what we've seen lately in some of the primaries earlier this year, some bond measures would get a majority. They'd get 52 or 53%, but they would fail because they didn't get to that 55%. And there's some bond measures right here in the Tri-Counties that are in trouble tonight because they're, again, getting a majority, but not quite enough for passage. So let's talk about some of the ones that are doing well. First of all, Lompoc Unified School District, 57% yes vote. So it looks like it's a little over the line. Still votes to be counted, so we'll have to see, but it is in the direction of passage. Measure P, which is actually not a school district, but it's the Santa Barbara City College District, their bond measure is doing strong. It's a 64% yes vote, and so it looks like it might be on the path for passage. But some of the ones in trouble, Santa Maria Joint Union High School District, they're at 51% yes vote. So just below the line. The College School District in Santa Barbara County at 50-50 right now, so the vote's almost evenly split, not near the 55%. The Santa Paula School District measures M and N. M is for the elementary school district, N is for the high school district. Those are about evenly split, 50-50, so not near the 55% threshold. Briggs Elementary School District in Ventura County at 53% yes, so it's still a little below the line. Oxnard Union High School District at 53%, so it's in trouble. And the Lucia Marsh Unified School District on the Central Coast, it also in trouble at 53%. Ventura Unified, they had a parcel tax renewal on the ballot, so which is a little different. It's not a bond measure, but just to renew the parcel tax that's in effect, and that's getting a 64% yes vote, so that looks like that will be approved. And the Hope School District in Santa Barbara County, 58% yes vote, so it looks like they may get that bond measure passed. Santa Maria Bonita School District, 57% yes vote, so they're in relatively good shape too, but still a lot of votes to be counted. Sales tax measures, we've been talking about this all evening long. Both the Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, Arroyo Grande, and Pismo Beach, all four cities, they had proposed sales tax increases for public safety and street repairs and other municipal services. All of those appear to be headed for passage at this point by significant margins. Grover Beach voters, the controversial issue G24 over whether water and wastewater hikes should be rolled back, and that getting a 65% yes vote, so voters liking that idea. In Lompoc, Measure R 2024, that's whether the city should consider selling 80 acres of city-owned land, including Ken Adam Park, to use as a space-themed educational facility. That getting a 53% yes vote, and so that looks like it could be headed towards passage, although we still have about a third of the votes to be counted at this point, so there's a lot of votes that have to be counted still. And transient occupancy tax increases, Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, Buellton, and Solvang voters all giving strong yes votes to those. Not final yet, obviously, votes to be counted, but they're on the path, it looks like, towards approval. We will, of course, keep you posted tonight, and, of course, we'll be back at 6 tomorrow morning with more coverage. It's 10:40. You're listening to KCLU Public Radio.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Hiscox, committed to helping small businesses protect their dreams. Quotes and information on customized insurance for specific risks are available at hiscox.com. Hiscox, business insurance experts.
This is live special coverage of the 2024 election from NPR News. I'm Aisha Roscoe.
And I'm Scott Detrow. If you're just joining us, Republican presidential candidate and former President Donald Trump has won 2 of the 7 swing states we have been tracking closely, North Carolina and Georgia. And that puts the electoral tally at 247 for Trump and 214 for Vice President and Democratic nominee Kamala Harris. That's all according to the Associated Press.
The path for a Harris victory is looking increasingly challenging, with former President Trump leading in all of the remaining 5 swing states that hold the keys to the White House. Earlier, we learned Vice President Harris will not be speaking at the Howard University Watch Party that she organized here in Washington, D.C. We also learned that the Republican Party will have control of the U.S. Senate in 2025 after flipping seats in West Virginia and Ohio.
Domenica Montanaro, what are the biggest things you're looking at? What are the biggest questions you have when it comes to whether Kamala Harris can ride a very narrow path to the White House or whether Donald Trump gets over the hump of 270?
Well, I guess there's 2 things. One, I'm looking at Wisconsin and if there's actually enough vote left in Milwaukee County for her to overcome what is a very large lead right now for Donald Trump. You know, never mind that he's up 51-47 with 88% of the vote in. He's up 140,000 votes or 130,000 votes. That's tough to make up, right? Yeah. Milwaukee, she's got a pretty sizable lead, 66-32. She's up by about 90,000 votes. You know, there's 62% of the vote in. You do the math there. There's not 140,000 votes most likely in just the rest of that. Madison, Dane County, you know, seen huge growth. 95% in. She's got 75% of the vote. You know, she's not going to get much more out of that. A place like La Crosse County, not probably going to get much more vote out of those areas either. And, you know, she's just off the margins in those suburban counties, the quote-unquote wow counties around Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Washington, Waukesha, just off from the margins where Joe Biden was in 2020. So,
which is the story across every swing state today.
Right. So if, you know, you've got 10 electoral votes in Wisconsin, and let's just say in theory it goes to Trump, right? Let's just say that happens. She'd have to replace that with something else to be able to win, even if she were to win with Michigan and Pennsylvania. So then you go out west and you look at Arizona, because Arizona is the only one that has enough electoral votes that you could sort of replace that with. It's 11 electoral votes. It's very close, you know, right now, about 18,000 votes. And fascinating thing that's happening, you know, we talk about the suburbs versus these rural areas. Maricopa County in Arizona used to be a place where if you won that, you're going to win Arizona, because it's about 60+% of all the votes that take place just in Maricopa, where Phoenix is. And Harris right now is leading there by 3 percentage points. You would think if you looked at that map, you'd say she'd probably win Arizona. But when you look at places like Yuma County, where Trump had won in 2020, he's winning by more this time in Yuma. So Trump is really running up the score in those rural areas in ways that, you know, I think maybe a lot of people were skeptical that he could in a year when people expected turnout to be down slightly.
Yeah. All right, that is the much more clear path that Donald Trump has to the White House at this point compared to Kamala Harris. We are waiting to hear from Trump. We know that Harris will not speak tonight, but we expect to hear from Trump shortly from West Palm Beach, where his remarks will take place.
We turn now to NPR political reporter Ben Giles, who joins us from Arizona. Ben, thanks for joining us right now. Domenico Montanaro was just talking about Arizona. We're still waiting for lots of votes there, but are you seeing anything interesting so far?
Well, Domenico took the words right out of my mouth. This race to watch in Maricopa County and how the presidential race is shaking out there. It is, I can't understate this enough. It is rare for a candidate, a Republican, to win statewide in Arizona without winning Maricopa County. There's only one example of that in recent memory. In 2014, a Republican candidate for the superintendent of public instruction here won enough votes in rural Arizona to carry the state despite losing Maricopa County, where most of the voters reside in the state. So it's got to be good for the Harris campaign to see that they're winning Maricopa County. But we're also still waiting for a ton of results from that county. The early results that were released were only votes that were turned in through last Tuesday, October 29th. So there's a ton of late early ballots that were turned in last week, over the weekend, on Monday, and then today as well, that have not yet been counted. And we're also still waiting for a report of Election Day votes, people who showed up to polling places to vote in person.
Okay, so it sounds like there's maybe a sliver of good news for Harris in Maricopa County. But when you look at those rural counties, how is Trump doing out there? Do we have a sense of that?
Trump is doing very well in the rural counties, and the Democrats' only hope at this point is sort of a return to what was once the norm in Arizona election night politics, where Republicans tended to do historically well among early voters and well among people who choose to cast their ballot in person on Election Day. And Democrats used to make up for that disadvantage among people who turn their mail-in ballot late and then don't have that ballot counted until the days after the election. If you remember back in 2018 when Kyrsten Sinema, as a Democrat, won the U.S. Senate race in Arizona, she was losing to Martha McSally, a Republican, on election night, but she made up ground in the days and days and days after Tuesday. Democrats are hoping that this year is a return to that once historical norm, and that is their really only clear path to victory at this point is picking up votes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as long as it takes to count them.
Can I talk to you about that closely watched Senate race that's happening there, too? What's happening there? Because it does seem like the Republican candidate in the Senate race may be running behind Trump in Arizona.
Yeah, Republican Kari Lake is really underperforming compared to Trump. She is about 110,000 votes behind Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego, who polls have shown consistently throughout the campaign had a healthy lead over Lake. And it's another example of, in Arizona, and I think elsewhere you see this too, Trump is immune from some of the MAGA stigma that comes with his brand of politics, but other candidates further down the ballot, in this case Kari Lake, who is a Trump loyalist and has modeled herself and her campaign in Trump's image, that is not a winning message, it seems, to moderate Republicans and independent voters who make up about a third of the electorate in Arizona. It's a crucial voting bloc, and the political strategists I talked to repeatedly said this election year that Kari Lake failed to properly reintroduce herself to voters after also losing a statewide race for governor in 2022.
That's NPR political reporter Ben Giles in Arizona. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to go now to another one of these big states, Wisconsin, and Anya von Wagnendonk of Wisconsin Public Radio joining us from Madison, Wisconsin, where she spent the night at a watch party for Democratic Senate candidate Tammy Baldwin. Hey, Anya.
Hey there.
So what is the feeling among Democrats in Wisconsin when you look at the gap right now? Trump above 51%, Harris just a little over 47% with 89% of votes in.
Yeah, the mood is not great among Democrats. A little bit before midnight, the state party dismantled their watch party in Milwaukee, and then here at the Baldwin watch party a little bit after midnight, we were also told to go home. The lieutenant governor came out and said that she thinks that the campaign is still in a good position, but that results would be out kind of later, and just told everyone to head home. We're waiting on results out of Milwaukee, and that's definitely a Democratic stronghold, but that's not a great sign for Democrats that they're ending their parties early.
Yeah, I will confess I have not had a chance to look at what the count is in the Senate race. Where do things stand in Baldwin's race?
Yeah, Baldwin typically outperforms other Democrats, and she is currently outperforming Harris a little bit, but it's about 50.1% for Eric Hovde, the Republican candidate, over 47.8% for Tammy Baldwin, the incumbent. If she were to lose this would be her first time losing a race in almost 4 decades.
Yeah. It's about a little bit more than 100,000 votes separate Donald Trump and Kamala Harris right now, waiting for more results to come in from Milwaukee County. Any sense how many votes are there for Democrats? Any conversation about that where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that votes are counted here in Wisconsin in certain large communities, including the city of Milwaukee, which is, of course, the largest city, it's the most diverse city, and it's historically a big Democratic stronghold, those absentee ballots all get counted all at once and then released all at once. And so that's why in the past it's been this sense of almost ballot dumping, quote unquote. It's just what's expected. And so we are waiting for that final absentee ballot results. But as Domenico alluded to a little while ago, there would have to be a really significant outperformance in Milwaukee compared to how Harris has done elsewhere in Democratic strongholds for her to make up that difference. And so it's not looking like that difference will necessarily come from the city of Milwaukee tonight.
There was so much focus on the long lines of college students, voting in Dane County and other places. Was that just less than expected, or is this another story of rural voters showing up to support Donald Trump?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of him outperforming elsewhere that he's done well in the past, and then her underperforming a little bit compared to Joe Biden in 2020. So that includes some of those college areas. We saw a little bit less of a turnout among college students, particularly in Madison. Her numbers are quite comparable to Joe Biden's in Madison, but that doesn't really make up for the growth of population there. And so percentage-wise, it's not kind of granting her some of those margins that she needed.
Wisconsin Public Radio's Anya von Wagdendonk, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi. And now we will go to NPR's Franco Ordonez. Franco, you are in West Palm Beach with Trump supporters, and we should note that Fox News, I think, has made a call for the presidential election, but we should be clear that the AP has not called the race yet, and so we are not calling the race yet. We go by the AP results. But tell me what's happening right now where you are, Franco. Franco, are you there? Okay, well, while we're let me go to NPR voting correspondent Hansi Lo Wang in Pennsylvania. Hansi, are one of the states that we're still watching very closely. Hansi, do you have any updates?
Well, Aisha, about 94% of the votes have been reported out in Pennsylvania. There were concerns at Pennsylvania because there's a law here that prevents the opening of mail-in ballots until Election Day, that there would be a major delay with the reporting results, but that has not turned out so far. That was the case in 2020. And at this point, the counting technically has not stopped, and we're seeing counties report out some of their initial results. And, what's interesting, there's one county having some trouble getting their mail-in ballot data recognized onto software. It's just an example of, we're talking about, a lot of talk about the candidates who's winning from the election officials' perspective. They have a lot of work still to do, trying to get data processed through systems. Some are counting through ballots once again, and as election officials will tell you, the results are not official yet until they are certified. So this is going to be still a weeks-long process from the election officials' perspective.
Hansi, obviously there's been so much attention on Pennsylvania, concerns about making sure that the voting took place and that there was that there were no problems, no issues. Were there any problems or issues today or delays or anything like that? Or was everything just smooth?
Fairly smooth, but very notable, as in some other states, there were bomb threats reported at multiple counties, and election offices' polling sites are required in some counties polling sites to be relocated, and some voting hours extended by state judges. This was very disruptive to election officials because, from what I can tell, these bomb threats came in through email right around the time when polls were closing, and so a lot of concerns about how that put extra pressure on election officials. And is this going to be a new reality for election officials whenever there is a major election?
That's NPR's Hansi Lo Wang. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Aisha.
And you're listening to special coverage from NPR News.
And good evening. It is 10:55. You're listening to KCLU We are, NPR is monitoring West Palm Beach, Florida, where it is possible that former President Donald Trump will be speaking in just a few minutes. If you were not following along earlier, we did hear that Vice President Kamala Harris will not be speaking tonight. She said that through one of her spokesmen that she would wait until tomorrow to talk about the election. So, but we are keeping a close eye on that. But in the meantime, let's talk about what's happening right here in the Tri-Counties. And we've reached that kind of time of night where we have a bunch of numbers in, and then it kind of stalls out, and it'll probably be 2 or 3 in the morning before we get another update on numbers. But we do know that there are some definite trends with some of the things that are going on, including transient occupancy tax increases. Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, Buellton, Solvang, all having those on the ballots, and this would be to raise money for public safety and other community services. Looks like in all cases headed towards approval. Santa Barbara County voters saying yes, 67% yes margin there. Carpinteria 75% yes, Buellton 57% yes, and Solvang 69% yes. Sales tax measures, again, those also getting a positive bead from voters in Santa Paula, Santa Barbara, Arroyo Grande, and Pismo Beach. Santa Paula's Measure R1, which would raise about $4.5 million a year, that getting a 58% yes vote. Santa Barbara's Measure I getting a 63% yes vote. That would raise about $15.6 million a year. Arroyo Grande's Measure E, that's getting a 66% yes vote. That would kick in about $6 million for programs for the city of Arroyo Grande. And Pismo Beach, Measure F24, that also getting a positive vote from voters, 64% saying we support this. Grover Beach voters, again, we've been kind of keeping you up to date on this all evening long. Measure G24, should the city roll back controversial water and wastewater rate hikes? Voters saying yes by a 65% margin. Lompoc voters saying yes to a proposal to end the use of Ken Adams Park as a park and selling it for the use of a space-themed educational facility. I say actually they're saying yes. They are leaning towards yes at this point. It's a 53% yes vote. Still a bunch of votes to be counted. We're still at less than 50% of them counted, so that's close enough that we could see a change there, but it looks like voters are at least leaning in that direction at this point. Again, checking out some of the bond measures in our area, and again, a number of them in trouble just because they're not getting that number they need. You need a 55% supermajority to pass a school bond measure. Lucia Mar School District on the Central Coast, 5 cities area, 53% yes vote. Oxnard Union School District, 53% yes vote. Briggs Elementary School District in Ventura County, 53%. Again, short of the 55% they need to get for passage. Of course, a lot of votes still to be counted. Santa Paula School District, both measure M and N. M is for the elementary school district, N is for the high school district. Those at 50-50. They're basically 50% yes, 50% no. It needs 55% yes to pass. But again, I want to emphasize votes still to be counted. Hope School District at 58%. That's, of course, in Santa Barbara County. College School District 50-50. So again, they're a little bit short of where they need to be. Santa Maria Bonita School District, they're at 57% right now. So they're on a track, it looks like, for passage there. Santa Maria Joint Union High School District at 51%, so a little below where it needs to be for passage. And Lompoc Unified School District at 57%, so a little over that 55% line. And Measure P 2024, that's the controversial one in Santa Barbara about Santa Barbara City College. Should it get more bond money to improve facilities and repair facilities? That up at it by a 64% margin, 64%. Ventura Unified District voters, it looks like they are going to approve a partial tax renewal there, not a bond measure, but it's a partial tax renewal of an existing partial tax, and that's at 64% right now. A couple state assembly races, just checking in real quickly. The 38th District State Assembly seat, Steve Bennett leading Deb Baber by a 63 to 37% margin. Again, that's the 38th district seat. The 42nd District State Assembly seat, Jackie Irwin leading Ted Norblum 55% to 45%. You're listening to KCLU FM and HD Thousand Oaks at 88.3, KCLU AM 1340, FM 102.3 in Santa Barbara, KCLM Santa Maria 89.7, KCLU, of course, 92.1 on the FM dial in San Luis Obispo, and can't forget KSYV 96.7, our newest station in the Santa Ynez Valley. Just a couple of moments here before 11 o'clock. Let me mention, in the 24th Congressional District race, Salute Carbajal leading Republican Thomas Cole 64% to 36%, and Julia Brownley, 56% of the vote to Republican Michael Kozlow's 46%. You're listening to KCLU Public Radio. It's 11 o'clock on KCLU.
Live special coverage of the 2024 election from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow.
And I'm Aisha Roscoe. The polls are closed. It is the morning after, and the picture is becoming clearer. Former President Donald Trump is leading the race to 270 with 248 electoral votes, while Vice President Kamala Harris lags behind with 214. Georgia and North Carolina have landed in Trump's column, while the other 5 swing states continue to count votes.
Vice President Kamala Harris has underperformed President Joe Biden's levels from 2020 and is now left with a considerably narrower path to the presidency. And at this hour, we are waiting to hear from former President Trump, who is expected to take the podium in West Palm Beach shortly.
Meanwhile, Republicans have picked up enough Senate seats to gain control of the chamber, while Democrats are still in a fight for control of the House at this hour.
And Domenico Montanaro, the story to me seems to be Donald Trump, the third time he's run for president, has his strongest showing yet.
He does. He at this point, I mean, he's got 248 electoral votes. He needs to get to 270, and that has not happened yet as far as the Associated Press is concerned at this point. But he is leading in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. All of them fairly narrowly, but wide enough that it's possible, I think, that the Senate is a real concern for Democrats and the margin that they could be down. They were anticipating that tonight they might, after tonight, be down 52-48 in the Senate. Potentially, if everything goes Republicans' way and they win in Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Montana, Ohio, I mean, we're talking about a potential 55 or 56-44 Senate for Republicans.
And real quick, what are you seeing in Michigan?
In Michigan, yeah, I mean, I wanted to zoom in on that a little bit because when you look at Wayne County, where Detroit is, there's only about a third of the vote in, but so far, Harris is only getting 57% of the vote in Wayne County. Biden got 68% of the vote there and got, almost 500,000 votes out of Wayne County. And that is just nowhere near what Kamala Harris is projecting to likely get out of that county. And being down as much as she is at this point, she would be able to make it up in a place like Wayne County if she was getting Joe Biden's margins, but she's not right now.
Yeah.
So going now to NPR national correspondent Don Gagne, who is spending the evening, the night, all the time in Detroit, Michigan. Don, you're a man in the Midwest. You cover voters across the region and the Rust Belt. We've talked all the time about this blue wall, but the blue wall seems to be falling tonight.
Right. We don't have a call in any of the 3 blue wall states. It's Pennsylvania, it's Michigan, and it's Wisconsin. But Donald Trump has a lead in each. And as I sit here in Michigan, in Detroit, in Wayne County, about 70% of the votes in the state have been counted. We have been waiting for the last batch of very small votes to come into this counting center here. Some votes that were dropped off at drop boxes, absentee ballots that were turned in on time today, but late in the day. As I look, I can see the U-Haul truck that has this maybe 2,500 ballots in it pulling into the end of this kind of cavernous convention center floor here. But again, Wayne County, which is the biggest county in the state, approaching 2 million residents, has only released the results for about 30% of its votes. So this is a county where Kamala Harris has been doing well, has a big lead in votes counted so far. One can expect that to continue.
Is she doing as well as Biden was? Like, just with comparatively?
That's the key. She's sitting at around 58, 59% of the votes so far, but Joe Biden was doing almost 10 points better than that in this county. So, again, if these votes are coming from Detroit that we're going to see it, and a lot of them will be, she'll make up some of the ground that she's behind. But the question is there enough road to pass Donald Trump, who's in the lead right now?
So what have you seen that has changed in the past 4 years? Because 4 years ago, these states did reject Trump after seeing him as president. What has changed now?
It's a good question, because we have seen kind of a newly energized labor movement in Michigan, especially the United Auto Workers, and they have launched probably their largest get out the vote effort, door knocking, one-on-one conversations with members, bigger than the union has ever done in recent memory. So that should have been a boost to the Harris campaign. Again, we'll have to see the exit polls and see what the union vote looks like. But you look at county after county after county, and you can see how Trump is performing better than he did 4 years ago. And in conversations I had, it was all the things you saw in the ads on television. It was people talking about their concerns about immigration and the border and the economy. Their dollar isn't going as far as it used to, and they generally have a rosy picture of what the economy and what their lives were like under Donald Trump. Again, that leaves out a lot of discussion of the pandemic and all that. And when you raise those kinds of issues with them, they're kind of dismissive. So he has clearly kind of tapped into that, and that has helped him in the red parts of the state, but also in the blue parts of the state, where he's been able to cut down the Democrats' traditional margins.
That's That's NPR's Don Gagne in Detroit. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
We're going to go around the room now in the studio and talk about what we're seeing with the election and what we're going to see going forward, what a second Trump term could mean for this country when it comes to the policies he's going to push for and when it comes to the things that might go differently. But let's start on what we're seeing with tonight's results and how we make sense of it. NPR political correspondent Sarah McCammon, Democrats were so confident that issues like abortion and democracy and protecting women would be their path to victory. What are tonight's results telling you about that strategy?
Well, polls suggested those were the strongest issues for Democrats, but once again, those were not the top issues for most voters. They didn't trump issues like the economy and immigration. And, my take is that the strategies that Democrats banked on quite simply seem not to have worked. These abortion ballot measures, from the results we have so far, have done well overall, not 100%, but that didn't translate to results in the presidential race for Democrats because, as we've said, in a presidential race, voters are thinking about many, many things, not just one thing. Also, we don't know how things would have looked had Biden stayed in the race, but we do know that Harris seems to have underperformed versus what Biden did 4 years ago.
Yeah. Mara Liasson, you were starting to talk about this before, and I think we're going to talk a lot about it the rest of the night and the coming days. How different to you is a second Donald Trump term from the first Donald Trump term?
I think it's very, very different. He knows what he wants to do. He has a better understanding of how to work the levers of power. He will have no one around him telling him not to do these things. I think that his policy agenda actually is less important than what he wants to do to the constitutional order. He's already been given a kind of blank check by the Supreme Court, who said that he can do anything he wants as an official president and be immune from prosecution. If he wants to send SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his opponents, he can do that.
This was discussed in the Supreme Court Supreme Court during oral arguments before their ruling, where they gave sweeping criminal immunity to the president.
So I think the rule of law is one of the most profound changes, especially if he wants to get rid of the professional civil service. That's a whole different way of thinking about governing, where you have your loyalists, not necessarily experts, but your loyalists running the government. And then I think the world order changes. If America no longer believes in NATO and wants to support our allies, everything changes. We've never had a president who is as friendly and positive about a Russian dictator before.
He's a convicted felon, convicted in a New York criminal courtroom. There are two federal criminal cases against him. He's made it clear he will end those cases.
Well, of course, and he will release all the January 6th defendants, including the Proud Boys leaders, and they are basically an armed anti-government militia group. So these are big, profound changes that I don't think that the American people have quite wrapped their minds around yet.
I want to turn to Domenico Montanaro. There are some networks that have called Pennsylvania. We should be clear that the AP is not, but CNN, Fox, and NBC have called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump, which effectively would mean that he has the presidency, right? Can you talk to me about that? And I should be clear, once again, the AP has not called it. That's what we go by.
Yeah, and, NPR doesn't make calls, right? And we've talked about this through the night, and leading up to this election, we contract with the Associated Press, which makes these calls, and sometimes are a little slower than the other networks because they're not trying to make projections, but they're saying that they want to make certain that there's no path for the candidate who is trailing to be able to come back and be able to win ultimately at the end of the night if everything breaks their direction. Pennsylvania right now is a state that obviously the Associated Press is heavily focused on, of course, as they likely are looking at, Wisconsin because it has about 89% of the vote in as well. And Pennsylvania, Trump is up 51-48. He's got, almost a 200,000 vote lead there. Harris is certainly not doing as well in the collar counties around Philadelphia. She's not even doing as well in Philadelphia as Joe Biden did, and Biden was off actually from margins that Barack Obama had previous to that. So, the Associated Press is going to be a little bit more deliberate. That doesn't mean that by the time I stopped talking that they would have made a call and then I would have had to explain all of this.
So, Domenico, this is a long night because it's, 2 a.m. on the East Coast, but it's not as long as, what was happening, 4 years ago, right? It seems like this race is much more clear now.
Actually, yeah, that's true. We sometimes forget. I certainly have Newsheimers, I think some of us like to talk about, where we forget. I think Mara coins all the good phrases.
That definitely sounds like Mara. Yeah.
She's smiling. But yeah, I mean, I'd forgotten until I looked back in preparing for tonight that the election wasn't called until Saturday. Actually. So, we waited a few days for that because there were only 44,000 votes that separated Donald Trump and Joe Biden in the Electoral College, despite the fact that Joe Biden won the popular vote by 7 million votes.
And it just took a lot longer to count mail-in ballots because of pandemic precautions.
Definitely. That's a big piece of it. I think also because of the fact that Donald Trump has badgered a lot of these states into, saying that there should be a result on election night, that a lot of the states have actually taken steps to try to make sure that they can process votes earlier, to be able to count more quickly. Plus, it's a lot easier to call elections, by the way, when the races aren't that close.
Asma Khalid, I want to go to you. Obviously, as we are saying, AP has not called this for Pennsylvania, but it does seem like the writing is a bit on the wall. These other networks have. We're still waiting. Talk to me about Vice President Harris as a candidate and, the importance of her as the first Black woman vice president, first Asian American vice president, and the first person with that identity to be a nominee, a nominee for a major party.
So, Aisha, I will say a couple of things. In terms of her identity, specifically her racial identity, this was something I heard about from Black women out in the field, but it's not something that was routinely discussed out on the campaign trail with her. The other thing I want to mention real quick is that, you know, I think that when we hear the words that Trump has said over the last several years, there's a tendency to focus in on the sort of more inflammatory comments he's made about different races. But as you look at these election results tonight, you see that it appears he has made inroads with a number of different key demographic groups. You mean, look, he seems to be doing better than he did 4 years ago. When you look at Latino voters, when you look at Muslim and Arab American voters, I was looking at the early vote in Dearborn, Michigan. He showed up in Dearborn, Michigan as the first person probably since George W. Bush in 2000 to go and campaign there, and it paid off.
And we'll keep this conversation going, but right now we just have to do a quick close of this segment. You're listening to special coverage from NPR News.
And we're going to keep going here and talk to NPR congressional correspondent Claudia Grisales. You have been covering Latino voters in particular. Did you hear signs that Democrats' efforts to court these voters was falling short, wasn't working?
There was a lot of optimism by Democrats, but clearly we're seeing that it did not go as far as they had hoped. And now, reflecting back in terms of the trends that I heard around the country as I traveled to a few states, for example, in Arizona, what I heard about there was young Latino voters who see Donald Trump as basically the Republican Party. This is who they grew up with. Mm-hmm. This is their familiar face. This is who they were comfortable with. And especially when you get into that border region in Arizona, for example, Latino voters worried about this border issue. And then when we look at Florida, Florida really became a playbook for Republicans. That's something we were already seeing last year if they wanted to expand their reach with Latino voters, because they had so much success there with Cuban Americans, with the messaging that they were doing in terms of putting Democrats in the same kind of category as socialists, for example, something that Cuban Americans are very worried about. And then when we look at Puerto Rican voters, for example, that is a demographic that Democrats have struggled to have turn out and vote for them. So this is very potentially part of what Democrats dealt with in Florida, maybe even in Pennsylvania. We'll see what those turnout numbers are. But as one political scientist told me, is the Latino community can essentially take insults to a level that maybe other demographics can't.
And there was all of this frenzied activity on the Democratic side over the past week after those racist comments about Puerto Ricans at that Madison Square Garden rally. Pronouncements that was having a big movement on late-breaking voters. We're not seeing it.
We are not seeing that. So it's just a reminder, in terms of Latinos, they look at Donald Trump, who support him, and say that's just him. He says some wild things sometimes, wacky things I don't agree with, but I agree with what he's doing, with what he has done with the economy. He has more proximity in terms of more distance, whereas Harris was closer to the economy and those concerns. And also, I think another interesting trend tonight is early voting. That is a message I didn't hear on the campaign trail in 2020 by Republicans, and that was something I heard repeatedly by Republicans this year. And earlier today, talking to Democrats and Republicans, I heard from both sides, they thought that we would see Trump lead in the beginning. Democrats hoped that it would change in the night, and it has not.
And Latino voters who we're talking about right now play an outsized role in several of the states we're waiting to hear from: Nevada, Arizona, and to a lesser but still important extent, Pennsylvania. You're listening to special coverage from NPR News. Donald Trump is on the doorstep of returning to the White House, sitting at 248 electoral votes right now, according to the Associated Press. Other networks have called the race for Trump, called Pennsylvania for Trump. The AP has not. Trump is expected to speak soon. We will bring you those remarks. Stick with us. You're listening to live special coverage from NPR News.
Support for NPR's elections coverage comes from Saatva, committed to making handcrafted mattresses that help lull people to sleep and keep them sleeping soundly. More information is at SAATVA.com/NPR.
You're listening to Live California Newsroom Special on the presidential election. I'm Scott Schaefer here at KQED in San Francisco, and I'm joined by Julia Paskin with LAist in Los Angeles. Well, this was not the night Vice President Kamala Harris and her supporters were hoping for, with Donald Trump all but certain to win another 4 years in the White House. Here in California, Adam Schiff easily defeated Republican Steve Garvey to win a 6-year term in the Senate. Proposition 3 to affirm the right of same-sex couples to marry in the state has passed. It will remove old language from Proposition 8 from the state constitution. Also passing Proposition 36 to roll back some recent criminal justice reforms and make it easier to charge felonies against repeat offenders of property crimes and push some drug users into treatment. In San Francisco, Mayor London Breed is trailing in her bid for another 4 years.
It's going to take some time to count all these votes. There's a lot of votes that are in the mail. There's a lot of provisional ballots. So these are early returns, and so we'll see what happens.
Newcomer Daniel Lurie, who had more than $9 million spent on his behalf with help from his family, is leading.
They underestimated you, the people of San Francisco who demanded change. Get this. The last time someone from outside of city government became the mayor of San Francisco was 1911.
Meanwhile, in Alameda County, the recalls against District Attorney Pamela Price and Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao both have about 65% support, although there are many more ballots to count over there in Alameda County. Joining us now is Marisa Lagos, KQED politics correspondent. She joins us from Washington, D.C., where she attended the watch party for the Kamala Harris for President campaign. And Marisa, I know people have long since filed out of that venue, but what was it like being there tonight?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of optimism early on. Clearly, people's energy and sort of hope flagged as the night progressed. I mean, as I was speaking to people a little after midnight as they were filing out, a lot of them still expressed hope that things could turn in Harris's direction. But, I do think one thing worth noting, I mentioned this earlier, but it's just this. I do think that there is a sense at her events of a very different type of politics. This was a person who was way younger than the other nominee, and she definitely kind of brought that with the music and the vibe, so to speak. There was a lot of Howard University students there, and obviously not, as you said, the outcome that they had hoped for.
Yeah, and I know there will be time to, do all the analysis, and we have to wait till all the ballots are counted and look at some of the exit polling and the details of who voted and why. But do you have any sense, as somebody who's been covering the campaign and has known Kamala Harris for many decades now, what went wrong? Why did she fall short tonight?
I mean, she said the whole time that she was the underdog, and I think that is playing itself out now as we watch these returns. She had only a little over 100 days to stand up and execute this campaign, and I think that, I would sort of argue from an analyst perspective that this was probably bigger than Kamala Harris in terms of what happened for Democrats. If you look at the Senate flipping, I think that her ability to kind of turn the ship around, so to speak, after that late exit from Joe Biden, and just the mood of the country. It's really fascinating when you look at these polls and a lot of the exit polls we're seeing, the gains that Trump made with men, particularly of color, was really, I think it was a turnout game. And it seems in some ways that the Trump campaign really executed that turnout in some of these swing states in a way that I think Democrats didn't anticipate they could actually make happen.
Yeah, and I don't know if they did better than Democrats thought, or if the Democrats' own get out the vote operation, which was so, bragged about and had so much money invested in volunteers and people, you have to wonder, did that fall short, or was the operation that the Republicans had just much better?
We'll have to kind of see, I think, we'll have to see how things shake out as we look at these numbers. But I mean, from what we saw kind of coming in tonight and throughout the night, turnout overall looks very high this year. So it may just be, that Trump convinced enough people that Harris did not. I think that at the end of the day, this was a very stark choice in this campaign, and you really do see pretty strong margins for the former president. In a lot of these states in a way that I think is surprising. I mean, that said, the Harris campaign has been saying for weeks that this would be decided by thousands of votes. And we still don't know what the final numbers are going to look like.
Yeah. And we should say that the Associated Press has just called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. The former president is gathering with his supporters and his family in West Palm Beach, Florida. And we're expecting to hear from him shortly. Marisa, while we're waiting for the formal, he is short of the 270 electoral votes, even with Pennsylvania, but nonetheless, he seems on track to get that. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, Marisa, but here in California, Kamala Harris, of course, carried the state. But George Gascon is going down as the district attorney in Los Angeles, losing badly. We've seen Proposition 36, which will roll back some recent criminal justice reforms, also passing easily. We're seeing the recalls of two officials in Oakland and Alameda County, the district attorney, Pamela Price, and the mayor, Sheng Tao, seemingly succeeding tonight. I'm wondering, and clearly Trump played heavily. He played up the border situation, immigration, people in the country illegally, and I wonder if people, not just in the presidential race but elsewhere, are just kind of looking for a different tone.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know sort of how to unpack all of those results. Certainly, I think some of the individual candidates you mentioned in California have their own kind of challenges and have maybe not been the best candidates or spokesperson for their own causes. I mean, interestingly, all of these congressional races we've been watching in California are essentially on a knife's edge, right? And so it's not as if we can say that it was
Marisa, I have to interrupt you. The former president is about to speak. Let's go to that now.
Friends, we have thousands of friends on this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? But it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. And every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family, and your future. Every single day I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body, I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have. This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again. And in addition to having won the battleground states of North Carolina, I love these places, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, we are now winning in Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Alaska, which would result in us carrying at least 315 electoral votes, but it's much easier doing what the networks did or whoever called it, because there was no other path. There was no other path to victory. We also have won the popular vote. That was great. Very proud of that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And, winning the popular vote was very nice, I will tell you. It's a great feeling of love. We have a great feeling of love in this very large room with unbelievable people standing by my side. These people have been incredible. They've made the journey with me, and we're going to make you very happy. We're going to make you very proud of your vote. I hope that you're going to be looking back someday and say that was one of the truly important moments of my life when I voted for this group of people beyond the president, this group of great people. America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's good. And the Senate races in Montana, Nevada, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, were all won by the MAGA movement. They helped so much.
I just want to step in real quick to say that even though Trump said that he has won the popular vote, we do not know that yet. Those votes are still being counted.
The Senate was absolutely incredible, and we did tele-rallies. We did tele-rallies with each one of them, and sometimes we did 2 or 3 and it was amazing to look at all of those victories. Nobody expected that, nobody. So I just wanted to thank you very much for that, and you have some great senators and some great new senators, and it also looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives. And I want to thank Mike Johnson. I think he's doing a terrific job. Terrific job. I want to also thank my beautiful wife, Melania, First Lady. Who has the #1 best-selling book in the country. Can you believe that? Oh, no, she's done a great job, works very hard.
We should also note that the control of the House is not settled, so we do not know that Republicans will control the House.
Children, and they are amazing children. Now, we all think our children are amazing. Everybody here thinks their children are amazing, but that's a good thing when you think they are. But Don, Eric, Ivanka, Tiffany, Barron, Laura, Jared, Kimberly, Michael, thank you all. What a help. What a great... My father-in-law, Victor, is tremendous, and we miss very much Melania's mother, Amalia. We miss Amalia, don't we, huh? She would be very happy right now, standing on this stage. She'd be so proud. She was a great woman, that one. Beautiful inside and out. She was a great woman. I want to be the first to congratulate our great, now I can say, Vice President-elect of the United States, J.D. Vance. And his absolutely remarkable and beautiful wife, Usha Vance. And he is a feisty guy, isn't he? You know, I've said, go into the enemy camp, and you know the enemy camp is certain
You've been listening to
networks.
former President Donald J. Trump, the apparent winner tonight. Not official, but certainly looks that way, speaking to supporters tonight in West Palm Beach, Florida. And we now return to live California newsroom special coverage on the presidential election. I'm Scott Schaefer here at KQED in San Francisco, joined by Julia Paskin with LAist down in Los Angeles. And joining us now is Hector Barajas. He is a Republican strategist and spokesman for the California Republican Party. Hector, thanks for joining us. I imagine you're feeling pretty good tonight, but what do you think accounts for where we seem to be at this moment tonight on election night?
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be on with you. I think you've got a big difference of the Democrats. Just, you know, they have become this party of the elite, and Republicans went after the working class people, the hard hats, and so that is where you're seeing the big difference. I think you've got with Harris's campaign, they just miscalculated the angst that people feel. You know, inflation. I mean, when you look at inflation, you look at these numbers. You've got gas prices are up 50% since January 2021. You've got electricity up 31%. The price of eggs are up 69%. And I mean, we feel it here, especially in California. You've got home insurance rates that are up 48%, and car insurance is up 67%. And so, you know, they didn't talk to that. They went out there. I mean, especially in their closing message that happened yesterday, you had Oprah Winfrey going out and saying that this might be the last ballot you ever cast, and that democracy may end. And yet the Trump campaign, their message was, they broke the economy. I'm here to fix it. Simple messaging that went right at the heart of the angst that people are feeling.
Yeah. And of course, Kamala Harris did win California easily, and Steve Garvey, the Republican running for the Senate, lost here. And it looks like there is a pretty good chance the Democrats will pick up some House seats, although that's very much still up in the air. So why do you think sort of a mismatch here in California with what you just described in terms of how the voters felt here in California?
Well, we've got an entire migration that has happened over the last several years of people moving out of California and somewhere else. And so what we have now is a very big disproportionate number of people who are on the higher income and those that are in the far lower income. And so you've got a shrinking middle class of individuals. And so, look, California is kind of an island into itself. It is a progressive place, but it is a progressive place that at the same time it seems to be out of touch with the rest of the country.
Yeah. All right. That is Hector Barajas, a longtime strategist with the Republican Party, spokesman for the California Republican Party. Hector, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And now we are rejoining NPR's special coverage in progress of tonight's election.
And this team that we had, the best team, and of course, even my boss, Susie Wiles, the best. Thank you.
That was Chris LaCivita. Now Susie Wiles is going to
Thank you. And
presumably speak.
Look at this. She's shy. I've never seen her be shy before. Susie. They're great. Everybody up here is great. Everybody up here is very special. But the Trump, who did you say? Oh, let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon. Now he is. Now he's an amazing guy. We were sitting together tonight. You know, he spent 2 weeks in Philadelphia and different parts of Pennsylvania campaigning. You know, he sent the rocket up 2 weeks ago, and I saw that rocket, and I saw it coming down. I saw it. It was, when it left, it was beautiful, shiny white. When it came down, it didn't look so pretty. It was going 10,000 miles an hour, and it was burning like hell. I said, what happened to your paint job? He said, we've never made a paint that could withstand that kind of heat. And but I saw it come down and turn around. And it was, you know, it's like 22 stories tall, by the way. It looks a little smaller than that, but it's big. And it came down, and you saw all that fire. And I'm saying, only Elon can do this. It must be an Elon. And I tell the story. I told it last night. I had a man on the phone. I had the screen muted, no sound. I was talking to a very important man, happens to be here. And that very important guy, one of the most important people in, I would say, the country, actually. But, you know, I was president, and now it looks like I was going to be maybe president again, so I figured I could ask him to hold. So I asked him to hold. And especially because you're going to be president again, they hold. So I took the phone down, and I'm looking at the screen. I'm seeing this crazy thing that's going around and coming down. It looks like it's going to crash into the gantry. And I said, oh, no. And I said, do me a favor, do you mind holding for a couple of minutes? I want to see this. I thought it was a space-age movie or something. I put the phone down. Bad part, I didn't pick it up for 45 minutes, and he was
This
holding.
is former President Donald Trump, who is on the cusp of victory to return to the White House, delivering remarks in West Palm Beach, Florida. Trump started with a formal declaration of victory type statement. Now he seems to be going into his rally-type commentaries, going from topic to topic, now talking about Elon Musk, who is a billionaire who supported Trump with millions and millions of dollars over the course of this race.
To see, and I called Elon. I said, Elon, was that you? He said, yes, it was. I said, who else can do that? Can Russia do it? No. Can China do it? No. Can the United States do it other than you? No. Nobody can do that. I said, that's why I love you, Elon. That's great. And you know, when we had the tragic Hurricane Helene, and it hit North Carolina. They were really devastated, the water. This was a big water, as big as we've ever seen, water hurricane. It built lakes out of nothing. Fields became lakes, and the danger was unbelievable. And the people from North Carolina came to me and they said, would it be possible, at all possible, for you to speak to Elon Musk? We need Starlink. I said, what's Starlink? It's a form of communication. So I called Elon. And I'll tell you what, he had, and it was very dangerous. People would die. They had no communication. All the wires were down. I called Elon Musk. I said, Elon, you have something called Starlink. Is that right? Yes, I do. What the hell is it? He said, it's a communication system that's very good. I said, Elon, they need it really, really badly in North Carolina. Can you get it? He had that there so fast. It was incredible. So, and it was great. It saved a lot of lives. He saved a lot of lives. But he's a character, he's a special guy, he's a super genius. We have to protect our geniuses. We don't have that many of them. We have to protect our super geniuses. I want to thank some of the guys. You know, we have up here today the U.S. Open champion. He's a fantastic golfer. He's slightly longer than me. Hits the ball a little bit longer than me. Just a little bit. Bryson DeChambeau is up here someplace. What happened to Bryson? Where is he? Bryson. Oh, he was shot. He's hitting balls. Oh, he's on the way. He's hitting balls. Bryson. Oh, look at him. He's got a great career going. Great U.S. Open, Bryson. That's a fantastic job. And we also have a man, Dana White, who has done some job. He's a tough guy. So Dana started UFC and came to me, do you mind if I use your... Nobody wanted to give him a rinse because they said it's a rough sport, a little rough. And I helped him out a little bit, and I went, and they said, this is the roughest sport I've ever seen, but I began to like it, and he loved it, and nobody's done a better job in sports. And you know, he's a very motivational kind of a guy, what he does. He gets these fighters, and they really go at it, and it's become one of the most successful sports enterprises anywhere at any time. It's doing so well. I'd like to ask Dana just to say a couple of words, because people love to hear from him. Dana,
please. Nobody deserves this more than him, and nobody deserves this more than his family does. This is what happens when the machine comes after you. What you've seen over the last several years, this is what it looks like. Couldn't stop him. He keeps going forward. He doesn't quit. He's the most resilient, hard-working man I've ever met in my life. His family are incredible people. This is karma, ladies and gentlemen. He deserves this. They deserve it as a family. I want to thank some people real quick. I want to thank the Nelk boys, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn, Bustin' with the Boys, and last but not least, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan. And thank you, America. Thank you. Have a good night.
That is a piece of work. No, he's really an amazing guy. But most of all, I want to thank the millions of hardworking Americans across the nation who have always been the heart and soul of this really great movement. We've been through so much together, and today you showed up in record numbers to deliver a victory like like no other. This was something special, and we're gonna pay you back. We're gonna do the best job. We're gonna turn it around. It's got to be turned around. It's got to be turned around fast, and we're gonna turn it around. We're gonna do it in every way, with so many ways, but we're gonna do it in every way. This will forever be remembered as the day the American people regained control of their country. So I just want to say that on behalf of this great group of people, these are hard-working people. These are fantastic people, and we can add a few names like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He came in. And he's going to help make America healthy again. And now he's a great guy, and he really means it. He wants to do some things, and we're going to let him go to it. I just said, but Bobby, leave the oil to me. We have more liquid gold, oil and gas. We have more liquid gold than any country in the world, more than Saudi Arabia. We have more than Russia. Bobby, stay away from the liquid gold. Other than that, go have a good time, Bobby. We're going to be paying down debt. We're going to be reducing taxes. We can do things that nobody else can do. Nobody else is going to be able to do it. China doesn't have what we have. Nobody has what we have. But we have the greatest people also. Maybe that's the most important thing. This campaign has been so historic in so many ways. We've built the biggest, the broadest, the most unified coalition. They've never seen anything like it in all of American history. They've never seen it. Young and old, men and women, rural and urban. And we had them all helping us tonight. When you think, I mean, I was looking at it, I was watching it. They had some great analysis of the people that voted for us. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. They came from all corners, union, non-union, African American, Hispanic American, Asian American, Arab American, Muslim American. We had everybody, and it was beautiful. It was a historic realignment, uniting citizens of all backgrounds around a common core of common sense. You know, we're the party of common sense. We want to have borders. We want to have security. We want to have things be good, safe. We want great education. We want a strong and powerful military, and ideally we don't have to use it. You know, we had no wars. 4 years we had no wars, except we defeated ISIS. We defeated ISIS in record time, but we had no wars. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. But this is also a massive victory for democracy and for freedom. Together we're going to unlock America's glorious destiny, and we're going to achieve the most incredible future for our people. Yesterday, as I stood at my last stop on the campaign trail, I'll never be doing a rally again. Can you believe it? I think we've done 900 rallies approximately from them. Can you imagine? 901 something, a lot of rallies. And it was sad. Everybody was sad. Many people, I said, this is our last rally. But now we're going on to something that's far more important, because the rallies were used for us to be put in this position where we can really help our country. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make our country better than it ever has been. And I said that many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together. We're going to fulfill that mission. The task before us will not be easy, but I will bring every ounce of energy, spirit, and fight that I have in my soul to the job that you've entrusted to me. This is a great job. There's no job like this. This is the most important job in the world. Just as I did in my first term, we had a great first term, a great first term. I will govern by a simple motto: promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. And I'm asking every citizen all across our land to join me in this noble and righteous endeavor. That's what it is. It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite. And we're going to try. We have to try. And it's going to happen. Success will bring us together. I've seen that. I saw that in the first term when we became more and more successful. People started coming together. Success is going to bring us together, and we are going to start by all putting America first. We have to put our country first for at least a period of time. We have to fix it, because together we can truly make America great again for all Americans. So I want to just tell you what a great honor this is. I want to thank you. I will not let you down. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Going now to former President Trump has just wrapped up his comments. We're going now to NPR White House correspondent Franco Ordonez, who is with the Trump campaign in West Palm Beach, Florida. Franco, you just heard Trump speaking. He took a victory lap, and he seemed very positive. Can you talk about what he just said?
Yeah, he was more on the positive side. You know, he thanked the American people for the incredible honor of electing him. He said he wanted to help the country heal. He did not mention Vice President Harris. He did not, as you had pointed out earlier, talk about fraud in the election. You know, he said, though, that America has given him an unprecedented and powerful mandate. He then listed some of the Senate Republicans who also won seats, saying that giving credit of their victories also to the, quote, MAGA movement. So it was a very much a, very MAGA supportive speech. You know, he talked about turning around the country. He talked about strengthening the border. He mentioned some of his high-profile supporters like Elon Musk and UFC President Dana White. And he talked about putting Robert F. Kennedy in a high position in his administration. There you go.
Can you talk about what the campaign was telling you going into tonight? Because it seemed like their theory of the case has played out.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
It seems like the theory of the case that the campaign has played out tonight. What were they telling you going into tonight?
Yeah, I mean, going into the night, they talked a lot about their positions, their policy positions that they thought was going to win the election. On the one hand, the strong border, strong economy, she broke it, I'll fix it. That was the key message of their campaign. It was in ad after ad. It was very effectively put out. But as we know, there was another message being delivered by the candidate, by former President Donald Trump, and that was the one of revenge and retribution and grievances. We did not hear that in this speech right here, but we heard it a lot over the last few weeks. So that is something that I think a lot of people are going to be watching for. I was waiting to see if he would bring that up today in his speech. He did not, but we shall see going forward, because he made it very clear that he wanted to address, quote, the enemies within, which were his own political enemies.
It will be very interesting to watch, because during Trump's first administration, which I covered every day of, he, even though he won, seemed still very angry most of the time he was in office. He had a lot of, anger about the way he was treated, about the way the press had treated. They had doubted him and all of that. But you didn't see that tonight. He seemed very thankful. He said, God spared him for a reason, or that he had been told that, and it was to save the country. And that's what he was saying tonight. He did mention those, the assassination attempt.
Yeah, it was more on the positive side. He didn't. The only mention of maybe a little bit of a grievance mention was the half joke about J.D. Vance as vice president.
Yeah,
talking about going on to to speak with CNBC and MSNBC, using some of the negative names that he uses for those networks. It was more of a positive message. It was more of a gracious message, trying to look forward. But as you point out, the one message he said, he wants to bring back division, or heal the division of the last 4 years. But the divisions of the country have gone way past 4 years, and he was also part of many of those divisions over the last 8 years. He spurred some of those divisions in order to build his base, to build his partisanship. Will he look to kind of heal those over the next 4 years? He didn't necessarily do that. He did not do that during his administration. He stoked those divisions during his administration. He stoked them after. He stoked them in his campaign. Now, he doesn't have to, he's got 4 years in office. He does not have to go for re-election again. It will be interesting to see if he changes his approach.
Franco, it's Scott. One of the things that I think made these results really surprising is that certainly the polls had it incredibly narrow all along. The projections had it as a 50-50 race. But if you just looked at the way that Trump was campaigning in the final week of the race, it did not look... He finished in a focused, strong way in 2016 and 2020, and it just didn't seem that way at all. Was it different on the ground? Were you picking up energy, or were you seeing the Trump kind of going on tangents and not particularly seeing like someone on the cusp of the White House?
I mean, I think in some ways the answer was yes on the tangents, yes on the grievances, but yes also on the energy. I mean, this, on the campaign, they did talk about the economy. They did talk about the border. But those were the things that were scripted. The things that Trump is known for is when he goes off script. It's that energy, and that's what really excites his base, and he knows that.
Yeah.
But what also he does,
Franco, speaking of scripts, yet again, I have to pause you because we're coming up to the top of the hour. We just have to take a quick break. We'll get back to you in West Palm Beach soon. You're listening to live special coverage of NPR News. Former President Donald Trump is on the cusp of returning to the White House.